Hello again. True crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sandra Chesky. On November 17, 1973, in Geechee, Manito, a small nature reserve in Iowa. On that day, 5 teenagers from South Dakota embarked on a trip there, planning to enjoy their Saturday together, unaware that only one of them would return alive. Sandra Chesky, born in 1960, was the youngest of 5 children. Her parents lost a son shortly after birth due to health problems. Her parents faced serious financial difficulties, which led to conflict. Eventually, the father left, leaving the mother to care for 3 sons and a daughter alone. She had to work hard to support her young children. While her mother completed her nursing studies, the children stayed with their grandparents. By the time Sandra was 18 months old, they had all lived together for 3.5 years. Life on the farm with her grandparents was difficult. Mainly due to their age, it was difficult for them to manage 4 grandchildren. So the children were often left to fend for themselves. However, the grandparents were very involved with their grandchildren, and the children grew up in a loving environment. After finishing school, the children were reunited with their mother. By the time Sandra started school, her mother had started a new relationship and invited her partner to live with her. This led to conflict in the family as the children struggled to accept their stepfather, creating a tense atmosphere. The mother wanted to build her own life, but her children felt like a hindrance. Finally, she made a difficult decision. One day, when Sandra returned home from school, she learned that she and her brother Bill were going to be placed in different foster homes. This news shocked Sandra, because she had not caused any problems and had tried to maintain good relationships with everyone in the family. Sandra felt that her mother was choosing her new partner over her children, which felt like another betrayal to her. The foster family she was placed with was dysfunctional. One day, Sandra told a social worker that her foster parents were abusive. Unfortunately, she was moved to another foster family that was also cold and uncaring. She did small chores around the house and felt like a servant. Eventually, she convinced her mother to let her return home. During this time, her brother, Bill, also returned home. He had previously lived with a police officer's family, where he learned strict discipline. The 2 brothers tried to behave and obey their parents, fearing that they would be sent back to foster care. However, after a while, Bill lost his temper, prompting his stepfather to send both him and Sandra to a strict boarding school in South Dakota. The rules there were harsh. When they returned home for the holidays, they begged their parents not to send them back and were filled with fear. In the summer of 1973, Sandra's family moved to a large farm outside of Sioux Falls. At the time, Sandra was just 13 years old. At a party with friends, Sandra met a boy named Roger Essam. Roger was a friend of one of Sandra's acquaintances, and after they met, they began talking and communicating regularly. Eventually, Roger asked her out on a date, and their relationship developed over time. Roger, 17, and Sandra, 13, are in a relationship. But Sandra looks older than her actual age, which is why Roger doesn't suspect her of being too young. However, Sandra is afraid of losing him and keeps her real age a secret. One day, while hanging out with Roger, Sandra meets his friend Stuart. Later, they also have another friend, Michael. The group, all of them come from respectable families and have no history of trouble with the law. Planning for the camping trip began when Roger and Michael met at school on November 16, 1973. They came up with the idea of visiting the Geechee Manitou State Reservation in Lyon County, Iowa, where they could camp, have a campfire, and share stories. Since Stuart, the oldest of the group, had a driver's license and was allowed to drive his parents' car, they quickly agreed to go. By evening, the group knew about the plan and were looking forward to their weekend adventure. On November 17, 1973. Stewart said goodbye to her parents and set off with her younger sister Dana to meet up with the rest of their group. Meanwhile, Roger invited Sandra to join them on the trip, which she agreed to. Her brother Bill had originally planned to come along, but he canceled at the last minute. The group of 5 teenagers arrived at the park around 9 p.m. Although they were running a bit behind schedule due to the time spent gathering supplies for their hike, the conservation area was home to vast forests inhabited by deer, as well as a large river that offered numerous convenient camping spots. After exploring the area, they selected a suitable location to set up camp. As night began to fall, the teenagers lit a fire, sat around it, and sang songs together. Sandra sat next to her boyfriend, hugging him. The group was having a wonderful time, completely oblivious to the deadly dangers that the night could bring. On November 18, 1973, a young couple visited the reserve, intending to take a relaxing walk and enjoy the scenery. However, during their walk, they stumbled upon something suspicious in the distance. As the man approached, he saw 2 lifeless bodies lying in the tall grass. He immediately reported the discovery to a park ranger and the police. About an hour later, police arrived, and after investigating, they discovered the bodies of 2 teenagers who had been killed by gunfire. The victims had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to their bodies, including their backs, heads, and chests. Police determined that the victims were killed at close range, giving them little chance of survival. The severity and proximity of the wounds led police to conclude that the attack was brutal and intentional. A fire was discovered at a nearby campsite, likely started by a group of teenagers. However, upon further investigation, 2 more bodies were found, both victims killed by gunshots. Police quickly called in forensic experts to examine the crime scene and collect evidence. The bodies were sent to the lab for autopsies, where the victims were quickly identified. All of the victims were from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and included 15-year-old Michael Hadrath, 17-year-old Roger Essam, 18-year-old Stuart Bod, and 14-year-old Dana Bade, Stuart's sister. The news of this tragic event has left the relatives and friends of the victims in a state of shock. They were known for their calm and kind nature, focused on sports, and stayed away from any criminal activity or negative lifestyle. It seemed like they were just gathering to relax. But, unfortunately, their evening turned tragic due to the evil intentions of others. The relatives and friends of the victims cannot understand who could have committed such a heinous act or why, as the victims had no enemies or anyone who would wish them harm. Stuart's parents told police that the teens had gone to the campsite in a blue van, but the van was not found at the scene. The van's disappearance was a key clue. Forensic experts believed it could be a crucial lead in solving the case. During the autopsy, forensic experts discovered that the victims were killed with various caliber weapons, including 12, 16, and 20 caliber bullets. This led police to suspect that at least 3 people may have been involved in the massacre. The investigation had difficulty gathering valuable information about the perpetrators. The lack of evidence, including the murder weapon, the victim's car, and witness statements, hampered the case's progress. It is important to note that in the 1970s, the police did not have modern methods and technology. This may have contributed to the case's delay. However, when a police officer from the Sioux Falls station contacted the police handling the case, the police reported that a 13-year-old girl, Sandra Chesky, came to the station and shared a shocking story. According to Sandra, after arriving at the reserve, her group of friends began setting up camp. As soon as they finished, a group of people emerged from the woods. They proceeded to attack Sandra's friends with guns. Sandra chose not to resist and was taken away from the campsite by the group. Sandra was then taken out of town, where she was raped, but was eventually released. She then tried to find her friends, but was unable to find them. The next morning, Sandra tried to contact her boyfriend, Roger, but her calls went unanswered. This left Sandra worried and panicked. It was not until she arrived at the police station that she received the heartbreaking news. Police have taken Sandra's statement. They want to find out what happened on the night of the massacre, specifically what she witnessed and who was involved. Police are trying to understand the motive behind the murder of the 4 young men and why the killers spared Sandra's life. Sandra explained that she and her friends had planned to camp at the reserve the day before. However, the group was delayed, and when they arrived, a series of events took place that led to this tragic incident. The group arrived at the reserve at around 22:30. Armed with a guitar and a small musical instrument set, they planned to stay there for the night and then return home. According to the Sandra, they set up camp, lit a fire, and rested around it. The teenagers planned to smoke marijuana and then go to sleep, however. Their relaxation did not last long. An hour later, they began to hear footsteps. The fire limited their vision, making it difficult for them to see what was going on around them. Then they heard a stranger yell. Roger said he was going to check. As he stood up and walked away from the campfire, a loud gunshot rang out. Roger collapsed to the ground. The group of young men immediately panicked. A second shot rang out, causing Stuart to fall to the ground next to his friend. Then came several more shots. Sandra then witnessed 3 men appear, all armed with handguns. The rest of Sandra's group quickly took cover behind trees and bushes. However, they were soon apprehended by the men, strangers who claimed to be police officers working to combat organized crime and illegal substances. The men implied that they had seen the teenagers smoking marijuana. Although they claimed to be law enforcement officers, they were not wearing police uniforms and did not display badges or identification. Sandra was very scared and complied with the criminals' demands. She did not dare to resist because she was afraid of the consequences of disobeying. On the contrary, Michael did not comply with the criminals' demands, so the men pointed their pistols at him. Michael instinctively raised his hands, but the attackers fired, seriously injuring Michael. Meanwhile, Roger and Stuart were still lying on the ground. The attackers then asked Sandra about a blue truck. Then the attackers led Michael, Donna, and Sandra toward the parking lot. After arriving at Stuart's blue van, an attacker asked Sandra to unlock the car, which she did. The attacker then got into the driver's seat and they drove away together. During the ride, the attacker talked to Sandra and assured her that her friends would be okay because the guns used were not real guns, but special tranquilizer guns that put them to sleep. Sandra found this explanation believable, thinking that her friends were simply unconscious and that they would all be reunited after everything was over. The attacker took Sandra to an abandoned house. His accomplice's car followed behind. The attacker told Sandra to stay in the car, and he got out to discuss something with the other men. One of the men then approached the car, opened the passenger door, and roughly grabbed her by the neck, pulling her out of the car. She was then brutally attacked. The attacker then got into the car and asked for Sandra's home address before dropping her off. The incident ended around 4:00 a.m. before releasing Sandra from the car. He threatened to harm her family if she told anyone about the incident. However, Sandra went to the police station to report the incident. The police were confused as to why the perpetrator released Sandra, even driving her home. Despite knowing that she could expose them to the police, Sandra was the only person who could help find the 3 killers. So she worked closely with the police. They brought in an artist to create composite sketches of the suspects based on Sandra's descriptions. However, the criminals did not mention their real names to Sandra. The attacks happened at night, making it difficult for Sandra to see their faces. Therefore, the composite sketches may not be completely reliable. The only details Sandra could provide with certainty was a description of the perpetrator's vehicle, which was a Chevy pickup from the early 1970s. After meeting Sandra, Stewart's car was discovered near a truck stop in Sioux Falls the following day. Forensic experts conducted a thorough examination and search of the car, looking for any fingerprints or other evidence that the perpetrator may have left behind. Unfortunately, the search did not yield any valuable information to aid the investigation. Police are investigating the location of the house where the criminal took Sandra. Hoping to find clues, data shows that this abandoned building is within 70 kilometers of the city. Search teams have been mobilized to locate the house as Thanksgiving approaches. Public pressure increases, and search teams are forced to speed up the search. The presence of 3 armed criminals capable of violent crimes against children makes people feel unsafe in their own homes. Sandra also joined in the search of the abandoned house. She also made regular visits to the police station to identify potential suspects based on composite sketches. Despite all their efforts, the case still hasn't yielded any leads. Sandra was placed under police guard at her home on Thanksgiving Day for her own safety, as she was the only witness who could identify the perpetrators. The police were concerned that the perpetrators might target Sandra after discovering that she had spoken to the police about them on November 29, 1973. Sandra and the police discovered the White House with broken windows. It was the house where she had been brutally raped by a stranger. Sandra suddenly ran up to one of the police officers and threw her arms around him, terrified as the horrific memories of that night came flooding back to her. As she stepped back, she noticed a blue pickup truck on the road. Sandra pointed to the vehicle, recognizing it as the one used by the criminals on the night of the massacre. The police quickly stopped the pickup truck, and a man got out. He was identified as 29-year-old Alan Fryer. Sandra was horrified when she realized that this was the man who had been present at the attack. Alan was immediately arrested and taken to the police station. Alan initially denied ever having been to the sanctuary and had nothing to do with the deaths of the children in the case, claiming that he could never hurt children. However, when pressed by the police, Alan began to break down. He eventually admitted that he and 20-year-old David Fryer and 21-year-old James Fryer had indeed been to the sanctuary on the evening of the incident. Although he claimed not to have participated in the murders, he admitted that David and James had killed the children. Alan disputed Sandra's initial testimony, instead saying that the teenagers had attacked them, causing them to attack back in self-defense. Alan's story seems too unbelievable. Alan, David, and James were 3 brothers from a family of 7 sons and 6 daughters. They all lived on a farm where they developed a passion for animals, hunting, and farming. Their father, a strict disciplinarian, made his children work long hours on the farm from a young age. Disobedience to him would result in harsh punishments, earning him a reputation as a fearsome figure. The daughters of the family were known to be calm and quiet, while the sons were notorious troublemakers. Alan, the eldest, had a charm that allowed him to make many friends, but friends said he was dishonest, often exaggerating and telling false stories from a young age. Alan showed disturbing personality traits, while David, the second oldest, was apparently docile and quiet, often yielding to his older brother Alan. However, his younger brother James had a tendency towards criminal behavior from an early age. James's troubled path began at the age of 9. The 3 brothers were extremely close and protective of each other, never allowing one another to be harmed. As they grew older, their involvement in criminal activities intensified, with Alan often taking the lead and encouraging his brothers to participate in illicit deeds within the city. David and James were always by Alan's side, willingly engaging in these unlawful acts. This pattern of behavior ultimately led to David's arrest in 1974 1967, at the age of 16, for recklessly driving through the city and firing a gun at random targets. The news did not come as a shock to the city's residents, as the three brothers were known to carry weapons and had a history of theft and robbery. Witnesses said they often ventured into the woods to hunt illegally when they were not committing other crimes. The three brothers often got into trouble, but they showed no remorse for their actions. 6 years after the shooting in the city, a tragic event occurred in the reserve. After a conversation with Alan, the police attempted to arrest David and James. David was later found at his residence, while James was in custody for robbery at the time. Notably, James had been released from prison shortly before the massacre. Sandra came to identify the suspects after they were arrested. Despite their denials, she was able to identify each of the men who had killed her friend. The police continued to question them to piece together the events of that night. It was discovered that James had been released from prison on November 18, and that all three had decided to go hunting. Each had their own guns, 12, 16, and 20 caliber. While hunting, they accidentally discovered a fire in the forest and saw some teenagers smoking marijuana. The three brothers decided to take the drugs from the teenagers and headed to their camp. Roger was the first to discover them and stood up to confront them. He was instantly killed with a shotgun minutes after the massacre. Sandra and Alan got into a pickup truck and drove away. Stuart, badly injured, tried to stand up, then fell and died from his injuries. Dana and Michael were also killed. All three brothers were then arrested and waited behind bars for the trial to begin. Sandra expected James to be charged with rape, among other crimes, however. The judges decided that a murder charge would be enough to punish the offenders. Effectively ignoring Sandra's traumatic experiences during the trial, David Fryer confessed to the crimes and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Alan Fryer was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 4 terms of life in prison without parole on June 20, 1974. Alan was initially held in the Leon County Jail before being transferred to a maximum security prison. Coincidentally, Alan and James were both held at the facility. The brothers secretly communicated and soon hatched an escape plan. One night, Alan and James escaped from the prison in the early morning. Their escape went undetected for several hours, until one of the police discovered their empty cells. News of the brothers' escape spread quickly, causing a nationwide sensation and prompting a massive manhunt. Sandra, the prosecution's main witness, was particularly concerned about her safety. After learning about the escape, she believed that the brothers would retaliate against her, so the police provided her with armed guards. She lived in fear for days, until the fugitives were finally apprehended in Gilley, Wyoming. James's trial took place in December 1974. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Sandra spent a long time healing from the trauma she had experienced, including the brutal rape and brutal murder of her friends. Unfortunately, she faced further suffering due to the public backlash. With many blaming her for the incident, her classmates shunned and bullied her, making her teenage years even more difficult, especially since she had already had a troubled and unsupportive childhood. As Sandra grew older, she persevered and rebuilt her life. At age 26, she got married, had children, and eventually became a grandmother. Years later, in 2016, she decided to share her story by writing a book. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was raised in a loving and prosperous Canadian family with 3 brothers. His parents, Bill and Susan, set a positive example and taught their children valuable life lessons. Bill worked at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had diverse interests, while Susan managed the household, and cared for her family without outside help. The whole family admired Susan, who showed equal love to all her sons. Although Brett seemed to get in trouble less often, it was because he had a talent for talking his way out of difficult situations. He was charismatic and well-liked by his peers. Brett's charm earned him many friends in school, and he went on to attend university after high school. However, he felt pressure to outdo his brothers, so he started a house painting business in the local newspaper. Initially, he did well and made his mother proud, but eventually he realized that it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought and had to drop out of university to focus on it. As his brothers graduated and found jobs, Brett stayed behind with his parents and younger brother, accumulating debt and struggling with depression. By 2007, his debt had reached $60,000, and he struggled to manage his finances, hiding his troubles behind volunteer work and kindness. Desperate and broke, Brett decided to rob a bank on October 28, 2007. He disguised himself with old clothes, a hat, and a scarf that covered his face, and limped into the bank on the outskirts of his neighborhood. After threatening a bank employee, he left with just over $1,000, realizing he would need to rob many more banks to settle his debts. After his first robbery, he was worried that the police would catch up with him, so he avoided going home for a few days. He told his mother he had a job in a nearby town and spent his nights sleeping in his car, periodically sneaking back to his house to check if the police were watching. Fortunately, everything seemed quiet, and no one was looking for him, which made him feel like he was doing things right. As he continued to rob banks, Brett changed his appearance each time. He stopped wearing his old clothes and instead bought second-hand ones or found them in the trash. After each heist, he would burn the clothes he wore. He also bought a fake beard from a costume store to disguise himself. The bank employees he threatened always remembered the bearded man, which helped to create a false identity. The Toronto newspapers wrote about the bearded robber, but Brett never made a large sum of money from his crimes. The most he stole was $3,000. Eventually, his luck ran out, and the police spotted his car on surveillance cameras, following him all the way home. By then, they still didn't have concrete evidence to prove his guilt, so they decided to keep an eye on the suspect. For 15 days, Brett didn't commit any robberies, which was unusual since he typically struck every 3 or 4 days. The police were starting to think they had the wrong guy and were wasting their time. However, their luck changed when Brett left his house, got into a car, and later got out near a bank wearing a disguise. He entered the bank, stayed for a bit, and when he tried to exit, the police were waiting to arrest him. After months of searching, they finally caught the notorious bearded robber. Brett was investigated for 7 months and charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a permit to carry a gun, Brett never brought a weapon with him during his robberies, not even a kitchen knife. Brett was arrested and faced 19 charges, leading to a prison sentence. He, along with his family, filed multiple appeals, which resulted in 11 charges being dropped. Once eligible, Brett applied for parole and submitted a petition. In it, he explained that he had committed the crimes while struggling with severe depression, resulting from 2 failed relationships and significant debt. Brett emphasized that he had not used weapons and had no intention of harming anyone during the crimes. The parole board accepted his remarks, but required him to undergo a psychological evaluation. This had a positive impact on Brett, and he took the opportunity to reconnect with his family, with whom he had not communicated while incarcerated. The parole board noticed the positive changes in Brett and granted him early release on November 24, 2010. However, his newfound freedom was bittersweet and even more challenging than before. Before his imprisonment, Brett was a painter carrying emotional burdens. After his release, he was a bank robber and ex-convict with a tarnished reputation. After the robbery incident, Brett struggled to find a job due to his notorious reputation. Even people who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they recognized him as the bearded robber. To make matters worse, their neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and frequently visited, began spreading unpleasant rumors about the family. As a result, the Ryan family decided to sell their house and move to Scarborough. In their new location, Susan started a new garden and Brett managed to find a job at a trading company, although his salary was not high. Fortunately, his parents were able to support him financially as he worked to rebuild his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist who consistently advised him to maintain a close relationship with his family. This advice proved to be valuable. Despite this, Brett's financial situation remained a challenge. However, his life took a positive turn in September 2011 when he met Kristen Baxter, a wonderful young woman who owned an apartment with a beautiful sea view. She maintained a healthy lifestyle through sports and didn't concern herself with Brett's past. The couple enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son happy and believed Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential and become a responsible member of society. Brett's life was improving, but an unexpected event occurred that threatened to derail his progress. His father's sudden passing was a devastating blow, and Brett's depression began to resurface. To cope, he increased his visits to a psychologist and devoted more time to supporting his mother financially, although his own funds were limited. As their long-term relationship evolved, Brett knew it was time to take a significant step. No longer just careless teenagers, the young couple needed to build a life together. Deeply in love with Kristen, Brett decided to make a heartfelt proposal. He had saved up some money and discussed his plans with his mother, wanting to make the proposal unforgettable and impossible for Kristen to refuse. Susan understood what her son Brett was hinting at, so she gave him money to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend, Kristen. Previously, the couple had discussed their future together, and Kristen didn't need an extravagant gift to prove Brett's commitment. However, Brett wanted to make a grand gesture and purchased a gold ring with a large diamond for her. Needless to say, Kristen accepted his proposal. Once engaged, the couple began making wedding plans. Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was shocked by how expensive everything was and how it made him worried about his job security. This motivated him to find a well-paying job to support their future together. He discovered an engineering job opening at a large tech company, created a resume, and applied for the position. After a successful interview, he got the job, which thrilled him. Brett excitedly shared the news with Kristen and his mother, and he even asked his mother for money to buy a fancy suit for his new job. Brett's mother had agreed to buy him a suit for a job interview. However, just after the purchase, the company called to inform him that his application was rejected due to his criminal past, which the security service had discovered. Brett was devastated by the news and felt like giving up. He questioned the point of continuing with the interview process if no one wanted to hire an ex-criminal, regardless of his attempts to reform. Disheartened, Brett decided to abandon his university studies and instead use the money his mother and brothers had given him to finance his wedding to Kristen. He didn't inform his family or counselor about his decision to drop out of university, nor did he share the news about being rejected for the engineering job. Brett created a false image of himself as a successful businessman. He'd dress up in a suit and tie, then change into painting clothes on his way to work. He lied to his relatives, telling them he worked in an office, and supported this fiction by posting photos on social media that he downloaded from the internet. When he was with his family, Brett would often pretend to receive important work calls, making excuses to take care of urgent business matters. He was skilled at deceiving those around him, and no one suspected that he was actually just a house painter. In September 2016, Brett's 5-year relationship with Kristen was nearing its climax as they planned their wedding. He even agreed to rent an expensive restaurant that would cost $100 per guest. The Ryan family was overjoyed, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around, with a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and a beautiful fiancée. Brett's lies had spiraled out of control, and there was no escape from the consequences. With the wedding only a month away, he had invested heavily in the event. To foot the bill, he repeatedly borrowed money from his mother, and when she could no longer help, he shamelessly demanded that she get a better-paying job. Around the same time, he planned an extravagant bachelor party in August, inviting all his friends and brothers. As his web of lies began to unravel, Brett confided in his counselor about the situation. For a year, he had deceived his family into believing he worked as an engineer for a technology company. The psychologist was dismayed that his longtime client had gone astray again and advised Brett to confess everything to his mother. After much contemplation and procrastination, Brett finally came clean to her. His mother was outraged, having proudly told everyone about her supposed wonderful son. She insisted that Brett reveal the truth to Kristen, threatening to expose him herself if he didn't comply. Moreover, she warned him that his brothers were already aware of the situation and sided with her. Brett couldn't muster the courage to confess to Kristen, having struggled to tell the truth to his mother in the first place. Brett knew the wedding was only a month away, but he remained silent about his lies, even though it would be better for Kristen to know the truth beforehand. He was unsure what he was hoping to achieve by keeping quiet, but he couldn't shake the thought that his mother might expose him to Kristen, causing a scandal. Every time Kristen's phone rang, Brett's heart skipped a beat, fearing it was his mother calling to reveal his secrets. He breathed a sigh of relief when it was just a friend inquiring about the wedding plans. Desperate to stop his mother from interfering, Brett hatched a sinister plan. Because he was not allowed to use firearms due to his previous robbery conviction, he decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon. Brett had learned how to shoot a crossbow from his late father, who used to practice target shooting in their garden. Though his father had taught him well, he never intended for Brett to use this skill for harm. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows from a sporting goods store and hid them away, preparing to carry out his disturbing plan. Brett created an alibi to deceive others into thinking he was at home all day. He rigged a fan to turn on at a set time, which then moved a spoon across his computer keyboard, automatically posting pre-written comments on YouTube videos. On August 25th, Brett dressed in disguise to conceal his identity and left his house through the back door to avoid detection by security cameras. He took a train to his parents' house, intent on taking care of anyone who might threaten his and Kristen's well-being. When Brett arrived unexpectedly at his parents' house, his mother Susan was taken aback. Despite her poor health that day, Brett persisted in trying to convince her not to tell Kristen anything, eventually becoming angry and aggressive. Susan sensed something was wrong and, intimidated by her son's intense behavior, warned him that she had already called Christopher and he was on his way to their location. Brett's anger and adrenaline surged out of control as he ran to the garage to grab a crossbow. However, his emotional state prevented him from making a clear shot, so he instead used the butt of the gun to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he placed plastic bags over her body and tightened a rope around her neck. Brett then loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother Christopher to arrive. When Christopher called out for their mother or brother, Brett shot him in the neck from behind, causing his death within minutes. Susan, their mother, had also called their youngest brother Alexander, who was also shot in the neck, but the arrow didn't go deep enough, and he began screaming for help. Throughout the chaos, Leland was oblivious to the violence unfolding in the garage and garden, unaware that his own brother was committing the crimes. He slept in his second-floor room until a scream disturbed him. Rushing downstairs, Leland found Brett trying to strangle Alexander, and a fierce fight broke out between the two brothers. Once Leland gained the upper hand, he pushed Brett aside and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Brett realized he was trapped in the house with no escape, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. He acknowledged that he had ruined his life and there was no turning back. He took out his phone and wrote a letter to Kristen, begging for her forgiveness. When the police arrived, they found Brett sitting next to his brother Alexander, both of them covered in blood. Despite his injuries, Alexander was still alive, but later succumbed to his wounds in the hospital. Brett voluntarily handed himself over to the police, asking to be handcuffed and taken to the station. There, he confessed to the crimes and revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden under packages in the garage. He expressed regret, stating that he had never intended to kill Susan, only to scare her. However, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, using them as witnesses to his twisted scheme. If they hadn't arrived that day, they would still be alive, just like they had been nearly 10 years prior. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his depression, but it didn't lessen his punishment. Despite confessing to the crimes without resistance and cooperating with the investigation, he received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the tragedy, has declined to speak to the press, but he is well known in Toronto for his traumatic experience. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Diane Holick. Diane Tammy Holick was born in 1958 in New York City and was known to her friends and family as a hardworking and joyful person. Her work ethic led to financial stability and her successful career. For over 20 years, she worked at IBM, a leading global technology company. In 1996, she relocated to Austin, Texas, where she held a senior position that allowed her to work remotely from her home office. Diane purchased a luxurious home in the suburbs of Austin and lived a privileged life, often hosting wine tastings, dining at upscale restaurants, and frequenting dance clubs. She was also involved in charity work and made efforts to improve her personal life. However, her life took a turn in mid-November 2001 when a severe storm warning was issued for Texas, bringing heavy rain and tornadoes to the Austin area. As a result, Diane worked from home on the morning of November 16th, but suddenly became unresponsive during a scheduled work call. Diane had multiple phones, but she wasn't answering any of them. Her co-workers left messages asking her to call back, but when she didn't respond, they grew concerned. They contacted the police department and requested that someone check on Diane at her home. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor offered a spare key, allowing the police to enter the house. Inside, they found an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As the police searched the house, they found Diane's body in the bedroom on the second floor. The detectives were called to the scene, and they were struck by the unusual cleanliness of the crime scene. There were no signs of theft, struggle, or forced entry. Diane's body was fully dressed and lying next to her bed. The detectives quickly realized that they were dealing with a crime. The investigation revealed distinct strangulation marks on Diane's neck, likely caused by a rope or similar object. Her wrists also showed signs of being bound with cable ties. The cleanliness of the house, the lack of stolen valuables, and the absence of forced entry led the detectives to believe that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. They suspected that the killer was someone she had let into her home voluntarily. An investigation into Diane's death revealed no signs of forced intimacy, but detectives did find suspicious dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance. A towel on the back of the sofa in the living room caught their attention due to its mismatch with the otherwise clean and orderly surroundings, prompting them to send it to the laboratory for examination. Diane's acquaintances reported that she had no known enemies, and the police discovered that she was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, a man she had plans to spend her life with. Diane had been married before, but that marriage ended quickly. She met Dennis through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance, Diane and Dennis formed a close bond, with Dennis proposing to her after 2 months with a valuable platinum ring. However, according to Diane's friends, the relationship began to decline recently. Diane had been feeling controlled by Dennis at times. Diane was also troubled by the decision to relocate to Houston, which meant leaving her home in the suburbs of Austin. She put her house up for sale, but realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the asking price of $435,000. This led detectives to suspect that Dennis might be involved in Diane's death, prompting them to invite him to the police station for a conversation. Dennis agreed to speak with them without a lawyer. The medical examiner determined that Diane died sometime between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. Notably, the wedding ring Dennis had given her was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry remained untouched in the bedroom. This raised questions about the killer's motives and whether the ring was removed to mislead investigators. During the police interview, Dennis appeared to be a grieving man. He was asked about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. Dennis claimed he was in Houston at the time. He stated that he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th and spent the rest of the day at work without contacting her again. When he couldn't reach Diane the next morning, he left a message on her voicemail. The police took Dennis' fingerprints and DNA sample, but ultimately cleared him as a suspect after verifying his alibi. He had not left the city, so the detectives had to expand their search for a new lead. Further inquiry revealed that an unknown man had inspected Diane's house a few days before her death, claiming to be a potential buyer. He had planned to return with his wife to make a joint purchase decision. This clue became a top priority for the police, who began questioning the owners of properties for sale in the area, hoping that someone may have seen this mysterious buyer. Several women in the area reported that a suspicious man had visited their homes around the time of Diane's murder. He, described as being 35 to 45 years old with a large nose and dark hair, had arrived unaccompanied by a real estate agent. 6 of the women refused to let him in, but one allowed him to enter and view her home. She who let him in reported that he acted strangely, showing no interest in the layout of the house or its features. Instead, he specifically asked to see the bedroom on the 2nd floor. When she became uncomfortable and asked him to leave, he introduced himself as Walter Miller. The police searched their databases for anyone matching the name Walter Miller, but the individuals they found did not match his age or appearance. A forensic artist created a sketch of the suspect based on the women's descriptions. Diane's killer removed the cable ties that had bound her hands, but the rationale behind this action is unclear. Did he know his victim personally? A subsequent autopsy revealed no evidence of forced intimacy or assault, yet the police remained vigilant, returning to the crime scene to search for potential traces of semen. However, these efforts yielded nothing. A police sketch of a potential suspect in the Diane Holick case was broadcast on the evening news, urging anyone who recognized the person to come forward. One of the few leads investigators had was a towel from Diane's house with a few short hairs on it. But the hairs were rootless, making it impossible to obtain a complete DNA sample. A woman contacted the police after seeing the sketch and reported a similar encounter. She and her husband had put their house up for sale 6 months prior, and a man had come to visit, claiming he wanted to buy the house for cash and needed to see it first. However, she refused to let him in, and he left. 2 months later, the same man returned to her doorstep and introduced himself as Jim Taylor. She was home alone with her young daughter, as her husband had just left for work. He asked to look around the house, but she denied his request again. This time, he became angry and aggressive, yelling and demanding to be let in. She immediately recalled the encounter and remembered writing down his name and the license plate number of his minivan. The police now had a crucial lead to investigate. A search of the vehicle's registration revealed that the owner was not Jim Taylor, but Patrick Anthony Russo. Initially, Russo seemed like an unlikely suspect. He was a married man with 2 children, lived 40 minutes outside of Austin, and was a member of a church music band. However, a deeper look into his past revealed a disturbing history of violent crimes against women. Russo had been convicted of a series of attacks, including one that involved abducting and attempting to strangle a victim with cable ties. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison but was released on parole after serving only 8 years. While in prison, he met his future wife, Janet, a church volunteer. The police found it hard to believe that Russo's connection to the case was mere coincidence. The police visited Anthony Russo's house with a search warrant, and he seemed unsurprised by their arrival. Although they found no evidence of Diane's belongings, including her ring, in his house or minivan, a neighbor reported seeing a similar vehicle at Diane's house on the day she died. In the utility room, investigators discovered cable ties identical to those that left marks on Diane's wrists. However, these ties are widely available at hardware stores. The police asked Anthony to come to the station for further questioning, where they inquired about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Anthony claimed that on the 15th, he drove to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Notably, the radio station was near Diane's house. He stated that he left the station around 4 p.m. but got lost due to a hurricane, arriving home around 6 p.m. This alibi is questionable, as the forensic medical expert reported that Diane died between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. Russo was questioned by the police about whether he was looking to buy a house. He claimed he had not inquired about any properties for buy, which would later prove to be an important statement. When shown a photo of Diane, Russo remained impassive and denied having met her. With no evidence connecting him to the crime, the police had no choice but to release him. However, when detectives investigated further by visiting a radio station Russo had mentioned, they discovered that his previous statement was a fabrication. The employees at a local business explained that they didn't lock the doors during a tornado warning because a large crowd had gathered in the lobby. Meanwhile, a woman who was selling her house contacted the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect in a recent crime. She had been at home with her child when he came to her door, claiming to be interested in buying a house. He was holding a pamphlet with real estate listings, including her own home. She allowed him into her home, but when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her. However, he quickly fled when he heard her child crying in the next room. She retained the pamphlet, which was later given to the police. They found a clear fingerprint on the pamphlet, which belonged to Anthony Russo. Russo denied ever looking at houses for sale, but the fingerprint proved he had lied to the police. Russo's false statement was a misdemeanor, and since he was still on probation, it was a violation of his parole conditions. The police arrested him, fearing that he might flee while they searched for evidence linking him to the death of Diane. To ensure public safety, the authorities decided to keep Russo in custody. The police were able to locate 15 women who had showed homes to a man who matched Anthony Russo's description. All 15 women were asked to identify the suspect from a lineup of 5 men who were similarly dressed and had similar appearances. However, only 10 of the women were able to positively identify Russo as he who had visited them to view homes. The remaining 5 women were unable to make an identification. Despite this, the police still had reason to believe Russo was involved in the crime and brought him in for further questioning. During the interrogation, Russo continued to deny any involvement in the crime, but eventually stopped answering questions and requested to see his wife. Meanwhile, the police received the results of a DNA analysis from the laboratory. The results showed that a hair found on a towel at the victim's home matched Russo's DNA profile. While this was a significant piece of evidence, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance that the hair could have belonged to someone else with the same DNA profile. Despite the accumulation of circumstantial evidence, the police still lacked a direct link between Russo and the victim's death. Investigation revealed two key pieces of evidence that implicated in Diane's death. Firstly, cell phone data placed Russo in the same area as Diane on the day she died. Secondly, a thorough examination of Russo's home computer uncovered a disturbing search history. Russo frequently visited an adult website where he consumed content explicitly depicting strangulation during intimate activities. Furthermore, the website required subscription, indicating that Russo actively sought out this material and was willing to pay for it. 2 days prior to Diane's death, Russo had accessed a particular story on the website that told the tale of a man who, under the guise of being a buyer, infiltrated a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables to make the crime appear as a robbery, thus disguising his true motive of satiating his desire for strangulation. Detectives delved into Russo's financial life and found he and his wife had a mere $2,000 in savings and were still making mortgage payments on their current home, clearly indicating he was in no position to buy a new house. Without concrete evidence, police arrested Russo and charged him with the murder of Diane Hollick nearly 2.5 years after her death, which took place on November 15, 2001. In court, 14 women testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about viewing homes, often visiting them in person on the day of the murder. Notably, these women all matched a specific profile, suggesting Russo had been observing them beforehand. While most refused him entry, one woman allowed him in initially but soon asked him to leave due to his strange demeanor. Russo's interest in homes was not random, as he specifically sought out homes occupied by women of a particular age group. The prosecution presented evidence that Russo visited homes for sale, often targeting women who lived alone. Russo visited Diane's house again, likely at her invitation, but this time with a specific intention. He had planned his actions carefully to avoid leaving any evidence. On a rainy day, Diane offered him a towel to dry off, which he casually discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him around the house, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed that Russo derived pleasure from the act of strangulation, which ultimately led to Diane's death. Before leaving the scene, Russo took cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which were never found by the police. He used a spare key hidden at the front door to lock up behind him. This was the prosecution's version of events. At the trial, Russo's current and former wives testified that he had a history of enjoying the act of strangulation. It's worth noting that Russo had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, but never admitted to his guilt, despite his history of similar crimes. Russo will become eligible for parole again and can submit his initial petition in 2044. At that point, he will be approximately 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anikin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Cayatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21. On August 22, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, They got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlincraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardor police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone, and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin Craft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin Craft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Cawley. Her parents divorced, and her mother remarried Bruce Jamon. Kendra had 3 sisters, Jamie Kalman, Ashley Lipham, and Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and pursued her studies in dentistry there. Following her divorce in 2010, she relocated to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone Dental Studio. Kendra, who had a strong Christian faith, aimed to use her dental skills to help others. The clinic, for instance, offered free services to disadvantaged children. In her free time, Kendra taught Bible studies and took part in volunteer programs, which involved building churches abroad and offering free dental care to children in Ecuador. Her career quickly took off, and her poor solo life thrived. On May 24, 2015, Kendra started dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. They met through a dating app, and from their first date, they became inseparable. Both shared similar values and interests and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having been in a relationship for just a few months, he and his girlfriend were already talking about getting married. Unfortunately, a tragic incident in a parking lot claimed her life, ending all their future plans. Investigators who arrived at the massacre site assessed the crime scene and initially suggested a robbery, as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Beside her body, they discovered bullet fragments and a gun magazine. However, evidence from the shooting shifted the focus away from robbery. Kendra was shot twice. One bullet hit her back and another struck her head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, exciton G through the chin, suggesting that Kendra had her hands raised behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed after the police obtaining CCTV footage, which helped reconstruct the events. The footage shows a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. Half an hour later, Kendra arrives home and parks in the same garage. A few minutes later, a man comes up to her, shoots her, and runs to the side, then jumps into the moving black Jeep. The videos were of poor quality and the crime scene couldn't be seen in them. The attackers couldn't be identified, but the vehicle was put on the wanted list. It was decided to release the images of the Jeep and the driver captured by the cameras to the media. The authorities asked the public for help, and that turned out to be effective. A man named Jose Luis Ortiz got in touch with the police. He reported that the car in the images was his, but made it clear that he wasn't involved in the shooting and wasn't drive. The vehicle. When questioned, Jose explained that on the morning of September 2nd, two of his friends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, asked him to fix their car and requested to borrow his Jeep until the evening. Jose agreed. He mentioned that later that evening, Brenda called Jose to a restaurant. That same evening, Crystal drove the Jeep come back to Jose's house. Therefore, the man was quite surprised when he saw his Jeep in the news. When Jose saw his Jeep on a TV show, he asked Brenda about it. At first, she said it was a different Jeep on the screen. Then, Brenda mentioned that Crystal had been traveling for work, and she didn't know anything about it. Brenda advised Jose not to tell anyone and just repaint the Jeep. Brenda agreed to pay for the Jeep to be painted. Meanwhile, Jose was waiting for a decision on his U.S. citizenship and wanted to avoid any issues with the police. He understood that Brenda had tricked him, so he went back to the police department to testify. He police monitored all the Jeep's movements that day and identified the two young women whom Jose had mentioned. Brenda Delgado was the first person investigators questioned. She claimed she didn't know Kendra and had never seen her before. When asked about her whereabouts on September 2nd at 7:42 p.m., Brenda provided an alibi, stating that she was at a restaurant with Jose and even presented receipts for the dinner. This raised questions about why someone would keep dinner receipts for so long. Eventually, with detailed investigation, the concealed truth behind the crime was uncovered. The central figure in the investigation was Brenda. She was born into a modest family, Luis and Maria Alato, who immigrated to Dallas from Mexico. Her father worked in a factory. They settled in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Dallas, where Louise found a job in construction and Maria worked at the U.S. Post Office and cleaned houses. Brenda was their second child and only daughter. She was an excellent student, well liked by her teachers, and worked part-time at a flower shop and as a waitress. Brenda was very ambitious and dreamed of attending medical school, but unfortunately, her parents couldn't afford the high tuition fees. After graduating from Skyline High School in 2000, she continued to live with her parents while dreaming of a prosperous and beautiful life. To achieve her goals, Brenda worked diligently. She was employed as a dental assistant and also worked at a department in North Park Center. In 2012, Brenda met Ricardo Paniagua and fell in love with him. Their first date, a dream come true for her, was at a Jennifer Lopez concert. In November 2012, just 3 months after meeting, Brenda moved in with Ricardo at his home in Fitzhugh Urban Flats. Ricardo was equally captivated by Brenda and even made an effort to meet her parents. In 2013, she posted on Facebook for his birthday. Brenda later found out she was pregnant, but at Ricardo's urging, she ended the pregnancy, which left her heartbroken. A bit recovered from the decision, Brenda decided to focus on her career and her beloved Ricardo. In the fall of that year, she started attending Sanford. Initially, it appeared that Brenda had moved past the emotional impact of the breakup, but this wasn't true. Her reliance on Ricardo intensified. When Ricardo shared a photo online with his new partner Kendra, who resembled a model, Brenda might feel jealous. Investigators, after gathering details about Brenda and her life, concluded that she had a motive to remove her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda was his ex-girlfriend. They had an on and off relationship from 2012 to 2015, the relationship ending a few months before Ricardo met Kendra. Ricardo believed that he and Brenda remained friends and didn't see any issues between Brenda and Kendra. After all, he had dated other women before meeting Kendra, so why would meeting her affect Brenda? Brenda believed she had come up with the perfect plan to win back her ex-boyfriend and eliminate Kendra from his life. She started by offering him support and showed interest in his relationship with Kendra. In reality, she was aware of all their future plans, and Ricardo mistakenly thought her interest was genuine. Unfortunately, men often misunderstand women and sometimes trust them blindly. Brenda had been plotting her own plan for months. She had opened Ricardo's mail and knew all his plans with Kendra, even when and where they had booked tickets. All of this was infuriating to Brenda. She wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher, sincerely believing that she had taken Kendra's place. Brenda transferred Ricardo's account to her phone to monitor him closely. Following Ricardo and Kendra became her main focus in life. She became obsessed with stalking them, eventually quitting her job to dedicate all her time to this pursuit. Over time, Brenda developed a sinister plan to kill Kendra, whom she despised. To carry out this plan, Brenda approached several acquaintances, offering them money to harm Kendra. A mutual acquaintance introduced her to Crystal Cortez, a 21-year-old single mother facing severe financial difficulties. For just $500, Crystal agreed to help her. Following Brenda's instructions, Crystal contacted Christopher Love, who agreed to carry out the crime. Crystal gave Christopher $500 from Brenda along with 2 types of illegal substances. Kendra was being followed by 2 women who wanted to learn her habits and daily schedule to choose the best time and place for their crime. On September 2, 2015, they used Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher waited for Kendra in the parking lot. They didn't follow her home from work because they were worried about getting stuck in traffic. That evening, they successfully carried out their plan. A few days after the crime, Crystal and Christopher were arrested. The suspects denied their guilt and being at the crime scene. However, things changed when Christopher was ND with the gun that killed Kendra in the side compartment of the car. Crystal, on the other hand, was nervous and constantly confused in her testimony, giving different testimony about why the SUV appeared in various parts of the city. In the initial questioning, Crystal confessed to being the driver in the parking lot. However, she insisted that she was forced there by an armed carjacker who had entered her SUV and made her drive. Trying to appear innocent, she falsely stated that her son was with her in the car. This claim was later disproved as security cameras did not show any child present. During the interrogation, as more evidence emerged, Crystal altered her testimony and sought to negotiate with the investigators. She agreed to testify against Brenda in exchange for a reduced sentence. Crystal informed the police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead and that the crime was Brenda's idea. Crystal stated that within 2 weeks of meeting Brenda, they started planning the crime. The CE found out that Brenda wasn't just sad because her relationship with Ricardo had ended, she was obsessed and desperate to win him back. She pretended to be happy about being his loyal friend, but her life started falling apart. She began to resent Kendra, believing she had taken her place. According to Crystal, it was at this moment that Brenda decided she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. That's when a plan to commit the perfect crime hatched in Brenda Delgado's mind. During her testimony, Crystal explained how Brenda came up with the perfect crime and enlisted her help. Together, Brenda and Crystal started planning to kill Kendra. They met several times and came up with various plans. The initial idea was to inject Kendra with illegal drugs or sedatives and then dispose of her. Brenda knew she needed a trustworthy accomplice to avoid suspicion, so she began the search. They drove through the rundown neighborhoods and asked several people for assistance. This is how they met Christ Ofer. He agreed to help and played a significant role in planning the details of the crime. The three of them decided together that the quickest way to kill her was to shoot her. During their collaboration, Crystal disclosed that September 2nd was intentionally selected. Brenda was aware that Kendra and Ricardo were planning a trip to Mexico, so they decided to eliminate her before the vacation. Brenda told Crystal she wanted the crime to appear as a failed robbery. Next, the criminals then selected the location for the murder. For days, they meticulously followed Kendra's movements, recording her every minute to ensure nothing altered for the chosen day. After her work hours, they tracked her path home and planned how to subtly access the apartment complex's secure parking garage. On September 1, 2015, they conducted a final check. On the morning of the crime, Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Jose and then picked up Christopher. Brenda was dropped off at the library in Caro Wilton to create an alibi, while Crystal and Christopher headed to Kendra's apartment complex. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes before driving to Kendra's workplace. After failing to follow her due to traffic, they went back to the house to wait. When Kendra arrived home, Christopher, wearing gloves, got out of the car, approached her with a gun, and shot her as she exited her vehicle. Crystal mentioned that she didn't witness the shooting but heard it. After that, she drove Christopher home, picked up her son from his grandmother, and later met Brenda at Jose's house to give him the Jeep. As a result, Brenda's dream was fulfilled. She was free from her despised rival and only needed to wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda felt delighted that she had executed the perfect crime. Crystal's honest confession and testimony against Brenda clearly proved Brenda's guilt, leading to a swift issuance of an arrest warrant. However, when police went to arrest her, Brenda was not at home. As a dual citizen, she escaped to Mexico. Following her escape, her role in arranging a contract killing was revealed, and she was added to the wanted list. On April 6, 2016, the FBI added Brenda to their list of most wanted fugitives, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to her capture. She was the only woman on the list at that time and the 9th woman ever to be included. Just 2 days later, Mexican authorities arrested her in Torreon, Coahuila. She was extradited to the United States on October 6 under the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Once in the U.S., she was charged with capital murder in Texas, and her trial began in 2017. During the court hearing, the families of Kendra and Ricardo openly shared their feelings. Witnesses verified Brenda's harmful obsession with her ex-lover and her intentions. In court, Brenda's cousin Moses Martinez discussed his sister's depression following her breakup with Ricardo. He also disclosed that Brenda had offered him money to attack Kendra with a baseball bat, a proposal he declined. At the trial, Jennifer Escobar, Brenda's friend, testified that Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo. She recounted that Brenda would read all his emails and track his movements through his phone. Jennifer informed the jury that Brenda had a copy of his house key and access to his bank accounts. She also revealed that Brenda asked for her help to get rid of the hated Kendra, suggesting methods like injecting something lethal or using a bat to put her in a coma. Brenda offered Jennifer $2,000, a car, and illegal drugs in exchange for her help. Jennifer talked about this offer with her parents and decided to refuse it. It's odd that, when presented with the suggestion to harm or kill someone, but no one reported this threat to the police. Brenda's obsession was highlighted through evidence presented by several associates in court. It was found that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead, seeing H. or as a barrier to reuniting with Ricardo. Evidence revealed that Brenda's obsession grew significantly in the months before Kendra's death. During the hearing, an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500 was presented, which Brenda gave to Crystal as payment for her involvement. Christopher received a cash payment of $600. Cell phone records showed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime. Moreover, there were over 99 calls recorded between Brenda and Crystal from August 22 to September 4, demonstrating their constant communication to plan the murder of Kendra. The defendant's attorney attempted to place most of the blame on the actual perpetrators, but this strategy was unsuccessful. The defense claimed that Brenda was not present at the crime scene, offering an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant when the crime occurred. Although Brenda did not plead guilty, the jury disagreed with her defense. Brenda was found guilty of murdering Kendra, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after just 30 minutes of deliberation. Christopher, who directly committed the murder, admitted his guilt and was sentenced to death. Crystal cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, which resulted in her receiving a 35-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole. Kendra Hatcher's family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom after the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family never believed Brenda could be involved, as they knew her as a loving daughter and a woman with solid family values and Christian principles. In conclusion, the tragic case of Kendra Hatcher underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and obsession. Brenda Delgado's relentless pursuit to reclaim her past love led to a senseless crime that ended a life full of promise. The investigation revealed the intricate and disturbing lengths to which Brenda went to orchestrate Kendra's murder, revealing a dark side that was hidden beneath a facade of normalcy. The verdict delivered justice for Kendra and her family, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the profound impact that personal vendettas can have when they spiral out of control. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Landry. Lucy Landry was born in 1971 in Rhondda, England, to Roger and Andrea Landry. She has a younger sister named Anna. Lucy had a happy childhood. Because she and her sister had similar interests, they were always very close. During primary school, Lucy's outgoing and friendly personality made her a favorite of her teachers and classmates. She was a beautiful girl, and at school she became one of the most popular girls. Lucy and Anna shared a love of ponies, and their father surprised them by enrolling them in the local equestrian club. This taught them discipline and showed off their talents. They later represented the club in many events and competitions. By the time Lucy started secondary school, she had become an excellent equestrian. However, her passion was not limited to the track. She also began studying the flute and piano, spending many hours practicing to master both instruments. Her hard work soon paid off. And within a year she had a comprehensive understanding of classical music, and she was accepted into the youth orchestra and joined the school choir. As often happens in adolescence, a healthy romantic interest entered her life, and Lucy became very close to Gareth Jenkins. However, she kept her feelings a secret. After completing her secondary education in 1989, Lucy decided to pursue a career in music. To this end, she enrolled in a BA degree at the University of Warwick. Her goal was to become a music teacher and dedicate herself to music education. However, things did not go as planned. Although she was passionate about music, she did not like the direction of the degree program. She therefore decided to change her plans and study urban planning. During this time, Lucy met Gra McAllister, and they soon discovered that their outlook on life was very similar. They shared a love for art and common interests. Their relationship progressed and they began to plan for the future. Lucy decided to introduce him to her parents. Roger and Andrea were delighted with the meeting, as they believed he was the ideal partner for their daughter. Her parents were so delighted that they decided to buy Lucy a house in Coventry, a city in northwest London. After moving to a new home, Lucy invited Gra to live with her and they continued to go to school. In 1995, they had their first child, named James. Lucy decided to drop out of college to focus on raising the child. Meanwhile, Gra continued her college studies and took a night shift job at the post office to cover her living expenses. For many months, she had to stay home alone to take care of the child and had to be away from Gra for many hours. She began to feel bored. Then, she found no better solution than exploring chat rooms on the internet to distract herself, looking for ways to meet new people. One night, while Lucy was participating in online conversations in many chat rooms, she met Harold Landry. Harold, a 53-year-old American from Louisiana, was born into a very poor family. And he knew that hard work was the only way to escape poverty. His opportunity came when he realized that in the oil industry, the key was not to own an oil well but to provide essential infrastructure for the owners of such. He founded his own company, specializing in providing infrastructure for oil field owners. Harold amassed a huge fortune by designing and manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States, eventually becoming a billionaire. In his personal life, Harold was married and divorced twice, and his children from previous relationships were not made public. A significant event took place in 1992 when Harold was still single. He met a married woman 20 years his junior. Harold pursued and courted her, and she eventually succumbed to his advances. On February 6, 1994, Harold took her out to New Orleans, hiring a babysitter to look after her children. After the evening ended, Harold accompanied his mistress to her home and offered to take the babysitter to her home. Outside the residence, Chris, the betrayed husband, secretly watched his wife's actions. After dropping his mistress off at home, Harold, saying goodbye, left. The girl's husband Chris followed Harold's car, which Harold noticed was tailing him. Acting on instinct, Harold opened the glove compartment and pulled out a gun that he had kept inside. When both cars stopped at a red light, the situation became tense. According to the babysitter, Harold pointed the pistol at Chris and fired. The bullet severed an artery in Chris's neck and damaged a nerve that connected to his vocal cords. Chris collapsed on the sidewalk with a wound to his neck. Fortunately, there was a hospital right in front of them, allowing him to receive immediate first aid, and doctors saved his life. Harold was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His trial took place in 1997. In his opening statement, the defense attorney told the jury that Chris was the victim of a tragic and terrible incident. As for his client, he said he had acted out of fear and self-defense. The defense's clever strategy led the jury, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, to find Harold guilty of the lesser charge of aggravated assault. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. After an appeal, Harold was given probation. In exchange, he had to pay a $500 fine and perform community service. Although he wanted to be completely exonerated, he thanked his attorney, Pat, for her hard work. They have since become good friends. Soon after, Harold and Chris agreed to an undisclosed settlement amount. By the time Harold began chatting with Lucy, he was already living in Covington and still wealthy enough to not have to work. He was also honest about his profession and everything about his past life, including his love life and run-ins with the law. Surprisingly, these revelations only made Lucy more attracted to him. As they continued to chat online, Harold painted a picture of a lavish lifestyle that Lucy found hard to resist. His determination and charm eventually paid off when Lucy ended her relationship with GRA. In the early 2000s, Harold traveled to England to meet Lucy, and she took the opportunity to introduce him to her parents as her boyfriend. Although they were surprised by the significant age gap between the two, they respected their daughter's choice and did not express any objection to the relationship. Harold felt grateful and pleased to be sharing his life with Lucy, and he did everything he could to surprise her with lavish gifts and anything else she wanted. By this point, he had fallen in love with her and was thinking about proposing to her. However, he wanted the proposal to be special and was waiting for the perfect time and setting. To achieve his goal, Harold organized a trip to his favorite destination, Mexico, with Lucy, her son, James, and GRA. The location was also convenient because his friend Pat, who used to be his lawyer, had an apartment nearby. Before the trip, Harold bought a diamond ring and excitedly shared his plans with Pat. However, Pat expressed some misgivings about Lucy. During their time in Mexico, Pat noticed that Lucy spent a lot of time with GRA, which he found unusual. He seemed completely oblivious to this and eventually went ahead with the proposal. Lucy happily accepted the proposal, and in mid-2003. Soon after, Harold surprised her by buying a multi-million-dollar property in a posh Worcestershire neighborhood. Their marriage was peaceful. They had wonderful neighbors such as Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, who later became lovely friends. Soon after, the newlyweds had their first daughter, whom they named Harriet. Lucy and Harold were both delighted to welcome their little girl, and from then on, he devoted his heart and soul to her. Equally important and affectionate was the relationship he maintained with James, whom he treated as his own son. But over time, their initial happiness began to fade. Harold began to make more demands on Lucy, which made her increasingly annoyed. He expected her to always conform to his preferences and do what he asked, taking on a submissive role. Lucy, however, had different expectations, and this caused tension in their relationship. Eventually, Lucy became outspoken and unafraid to express her thoughts, and in this move, her husband was unwilling to give in. James witnessed the breakdown of his mother and stepfather's relationship. The neighbors were disturbed by the constant arguments that lasted for hours. They also knew that Lucy and Harold had an alcohol problem, which caused their loud arguments and complaints. Whenever the couple had a particularly intense argument, resulting in them not speaking to each other for a while, the neighbors felt a sense of relief and peace. In mid-2009, Lucy used social media to reconnect with Gareth, an old friend from high school whom she had not spoken to in years. Lucy's husband, Harold, would often go to bed while Lucy stayed up to chat online. Harold began to realize that Lucy was using social media to find someone new, just as she had found him before. But instead of confronting her, he decided to give her some space, and he traveled to Mexico and stayed there for a while. Meanwhile, Lucy invites Gareth to live with her. In the fall of 2009, her husband Harold returns to England in the hope of mending their marriage. However, as soon as he moves in, Lucy asks for a divorce. Initially, he is devastated. Then, after a few weeks, Harold begins a relationship. He meets this new woman online. She lives nearby and goes by the name Rachel. As Lucy and Harold pursue their new relationship, their divorce negotiations begin, but new conflicts arise. One major point of disagreement is the house. Lucy wants to keep it to ensure stability for their children, while Harold is determined to sell it. He gives Lucy money to buy a smaller apartment and removes her from his will. When Lucy discovers this, her hatred for him drives her to share everything about Harold's past with their son James, leaving nothing out. Amid the tension, Gareth invited Lucy to come to Wales with him for a few days. After returning home, Lucy no longer tried to hide her phone conversations from her new love. Meanwhile, Lucy and Harold were both drinking heavily, and the arguments escalated, leaving the children exposed to a violent and unbearable atmosphere. On Monday, February 1st, 2010, Harold had been drinking all day. When a package arrived for Stephen, Harold mistakenly received it. That evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen returned home from work to find a notification that his package had been delivered to the Landry's home. Seeing the lights on, Stephen went to their house to collect the package. Harold invited him in and offered him a drink. After a brief conversation with Lucy, Stephen realized that Harold was drunk. He took his package, apologized, and left. The couple then argued about buying furniture for their upcoming move. The disagreement was trivial, but it escalated into a fight. During the argument, Harold hit Lucy across the cheek with a kitchen utensil. James, who had learned to deal with their arguments over the years, intervened and saw that his mother was injured. He quickly called the police and made it his priority to get his sister to safety. Lucy and the children fled the house to seek help after the incident. Lucy ran to Stephen's house. However, Harold caught up with her and stabbed her several times with a knife before leaving her under a bush in the garden. Alerted by Lucy's screams, Stephen ran outside and found her after only a few steps. Initially, he thought she had passed out, but he soon realized the severity of her injuries. After receiving an emergency call, the police arrived at the scene. They called an ambulance and searched the surrounding area for the culprit. However, they only found the children hiding terrified in the backyard in the dark. An ambulance then took Lucy to the hospital. Unfortunately, her heart had stopped. Harold went to his new girlfriend Rachel's house, revealing that something terrible had happened, but he did not explain further. He gave her $40,000 in bank money, some cash, his car keys, and some blank checks with his signature on them. He then returned home. Several police patrols searched for him, and he was eventually found walking along the road and arrested. Her parents Roger and Andrea were devastated after hearing the news. In a statement released by the police, her parents asked for respect while they grieved for the loss of their daughter. They declined to speak to the media at this time. Instead, they focused on caring for their grandchildren. A post-mortem examination later confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. On February 5, 2010, Harold was brought to trial and charged with murder, based on evidence and witness testimony from James. The trial began in early February 2011, with Judge David Fawson presiding and Harold's attorney Andy Childs defending. During the trial, Harold's defense team argued that he was driven to action by his wife Lucy's intense anger, which left him feeling provoked and left with no other choice. Harold took the stand, tearfully expressing his love for Lucy and remorse for his actions. He then followed his attorney's strategy, claiming that he was guilty of involuntary manslaughter because Lucy had pushed him to the limit. The prosecution presented a highly detailed animation of the many injuries the victim suffered. This presentation shocked those in the courtroom. On February 24, 2011, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Harold Landry guilty of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Landry. Harold was 64 years old at the time of the murder. The following day, the judge delivered a scathing statement when sentencing Harold. He described the attack as horrific and unforgivable, dismissing Harold's claims that Lucy may have provoked him. The judge viewed these claims as a desperate attempt by Harold to defend himself. As a result, Harold was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years before he could be considered for parole. This meant that he would have to be over 80 before he was eligible for parole. Lucy's family and friends expressed their gratitude not only for the case being resolved, but also for the judge's comments. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Blagg family. Jennifer Blagg was born on January 8, 1967, in Oklahoma, USA. She grew up with her mother and one brother, and they were very close from a young age. Jennifer was creative, sociable, and enjoyed playing the piano and dancing. However, she faced a traumatic experience in childhood when, at the age of 12, she was raped by a family friend who was much older than her. This incident deeply affected her, and it took a long time for her to heal. Despite this, she eventually overcame her feelings of resentment, pain, and anger, graduated from high school, and went on to attend college. Her future husband, Michael, was born into a military family. They frequently moved due to his father's career as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Growing up in such an environment was challenging, but Michael was a calm and obedient child. Michael was hardworking and intelligent. He even participated in a program sponsored by the governor to study nuclear physics, for which he received an honorary diploma. He continued to pursue his studies in science thereafter. Michael achieved everything by his own labor, because nothing in life came to him easily. He later shared that during this time, he worked as a pizza delivery driver to cover his college expenses. At 21, he married his first wife, but after about a year of constant issues in their relationship, they decided to get a divorce. In 2008, Jennifer enrolled at San Diego State University to pursue a business degree. Meanwhile, Michael chose to follow his father's path and joined the Navy, where he became a decorated Gulf War veteran and helicopter pilot. After returning from a business trip, he had some free time to explore the city. He attended a party with mutual friends, where he met Jennifer. They feel an attraction to each other, and Michael asked her out on a date, which she accepted. They went to the movies and afterward decided to start dating. In 1991, Michael and Jennifer got married and moved to the quiet town of Simpsonville in Southern California. They enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and made many friends through their church. As a deeply religious couple, they seemed well prepared to start a family, even though Michael was often away serving in the Navy. 4 years later, they welcomed a daughter named Abby. After her birth, Michael left the military and secured a high-paying engineering job with a flexible schedule, allowing him to spend more time with his family. In his spare time, Michael began teaching Sunday school, which he considered important. However, due to Michael's job, they had to move several times, which was challenging for Jennifer. She often felt like just as she was settling into a new city and making new friends, her family had to move again. Despite her struggles, but when Michael proposed moving, Jennifer easily accepted because of her religious beliefs. Their final move occurred in 2001, when they decided to settle in Grand Junction, Colorado. It was a small, cozy town known as a winter resort, surrounded by mountains that attracted wealthy tourists. In Grand Junction, Michael took on an important role as an engineer for a company in that city. He also began teaching at the local Sunday school affiliated with the church. The family was very religious, and friends mentioned that they prayed about nearly every decision they made together. By 2001, Abby was 6 years old. She was getting ready for school and attended preparatory courses at a Christian school where her mother, Jennifer, worked as a teacher's assistant. Abby was kind and helpful, assisting her parents with various household chores. She is also very religious, like her father and mother. On November 1, 2001, Michael called 911. The police were called and, upon arrival, they met Michael. According to Michael, he had just returned home from work and was immediately concerned when he saw the open door, because his family is always closed. As he entered the house, he didn't see anyone inside. In the bedroom, he discovered blood on bed, which dripped onto the floor. He also noticed that his wife's jewelry box was empty and that her handbag was on the floor, scattered with other belongings. Despite searching the entire house, he could not find his wife or daughter. Michael believed they were still alive and thought they might have been kidnapped, so he called for help. Based on the large amount of blood found, the police suspected that it was unlikely Jennifer and Abby were alive. They feared both may have been murdered. Since the Colorado River was nearby, the authorities considered the possibility that the bodies could have been disposed of in the river. They thoroughly searched the area, but found no signs of Jennifer and Abby. As the search operation expanded, volunteers and search teams joined forces to scour the surrounding region for any evidence related to Jennifer and Abby. Additionally, relatives of Jennifer traveled to the city to help with the search. While the search was ongoing, forensic experts examined the Blagg family home and collected various documents for analysis. They discovered significant amounts of blood on the bed and several fingerprints, which were sent to the lab for testing. Detectives also interviewed neighbors to piece together the timeline of incident from that day, but the neighbors did not see Jennifer and Abby. Michael was at work during the attack, a fact supported by CCTV footage and his colleagues' testimonies. He stated that he saw Jennifer and Abby alive early that morning, indicating that the attack likely occurred before he returned home from work. However, Michael was not excluded from the suspect list, as close family members are often scrutinized in such cases. However, it was crucial to verify the details carefully. The police interviewed Michael at the station, where he provided a thorough account of the incident from the previous day. He mentioned that around 7 p.m., Jennifer received a call from a friend who invited her to meet the following evening. After that, they watched TV and prepared for bed. By around 10 p.m., the entire family had gone to their rooms. Michael noted that early in the morning, when he woke up for work, Jennifer and Abby were still asleep. They were scheduled to get up around 6:30 to allow him to take Abby to her preparatory classes at school. After that, Jennifer returned home to take care of her daily tasks. Her husband Michael usually called her several times a day, but on that day, she didn't answer his calls. Assuming she might be busy, Michael didn't immediately worry. He then called her friend, assuming they decided to meet during the day, but the friend didn't know her whereabouts. Michael then continued with his day. He assumed she was at home, doing the laundry, cleaning, and cooking dinner. As soon as Michael returned home from work, he sensed that something was terribly wrong. There are two things that make him feel unusual. His daughter, Abby, didn't greet him as she usually did, and there was no smell of dinner cooking, which was unexpected since his wife Jennifer had planned to cook before meeting her friend. The scene became even more ominous when he spotted blood and immediately dialed the police. To preserve the crime scene, Michael went outside and waited for the police to arrive. The detectives then took over the investigation, and their inquiries led them to Abby's school. They discovered that she hadn't attended classes that day, which didn't surprise her teachers. Apparently, someone had called the class teacher the day before, claiming to be Abby's father and informing the school that she would be absent. The teacher wasn't suspicious at the time, but they did recall that a man, claiming to be Michael, had made the call. However, when questioned, Michael denied making the call, which only increased the suspicions about him. Further investigations revealed that Jennifer's friend from church, Melson, had noticed trouble in the Blagg family's relationship. Melson reported that Jennifer appeared to be extremely afraid of Michael. Jennifer only felt comfortable meeting in secret when Michael was not around. Jennifer had likely been forbidden by Michael from having visitors at their home. On one occasion, when Melson visited their house at length, Jennifer became anxious and hastily asked her to leave, probably to avoid Michael finding out that her had been to their house. The day before Jennifer's disappearance, Melson contacted Jennifer to invite her and Abby to visit. Notably, she specified that Michael, her husband, would not accompany them, which was unusual since the family typically traveled together. Melson agreed but thought the arrangement was peculiar. It was clear that Jennifer had recently argued with Michael and wanted space from him. Despite the plans, Jennifer never showed up the following morning. Later, investigators discovered voice messages from Michael to Jennifer, in which he sent her well wishes and affectionate greetings. However, authorities suspect that these messages may have been part of a setup, as it's possible that both Jennifer and Abby were already dead when the messages were sent. This thing raised suspicion about Michael's involvement, but he insisted on his innocence. He even gave interviews to journalists, expressing frustration that the police were focusing on him, and even they overlooking other suspects. Michael said he was deeply concerned about his wife and daughter's whereabouts and felt the real perpetrator was still at large. He has offered a $3,000 reward for any information that could help speed up the investigation. The detectives remained suspicious of Michael's behavior, so they decided to monitor him closely. During their investigation, they discovered blood on the bed, but strangely, very little was found on the surrounding walls. Normally, blood splatters and scatters in various directions, but in this case, that wasn't the case. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the bed belonged to Jennifer. Additionally, when the detectives applied luminol to the family van, they found several hidden blood stains on the door and inside the vehicle, suggesting that it had been used to transport the victims, Abby and Jennifer. Michael reported to work on the day his wife and daughter disappeared. An investigation of the house revealed 55 fingerprints, many of which belonged to Michael. Notably, 17 fingerprints were unidentified, and 6 of those were small to potentially belong to young daughter, Abby. Despite this, Michael claimed that he had seen nothing unusual and pointed out that it was normal for family members' fingerprints to be present in the home. As the investigation continued, Michael relocated to a different house and didn't return to the original one, even after restrictions were lifted. He chose not to clean and no return to the house, stating that it was too painful for him. However, this decision ultimately worked in the police's favor as they were able to periodically examine the crime scene. In interviews with journalists, Michael portrayed the disappearance as resembling a robbery, citing the missing jewelry and money from the house. He also mentioned that there had been a string of burglaries in the area over the past year, suggesting that his family had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Michael, the thieves may have broken in while his family was asleep, inadvertently targeting them. He suspected that the robbers were provoked by something when they entered his house. Even so, he held on to the hope that his wife and daughter were still alive. He often referenced Bible verses when communicating with the media, maintaining his innocence when questioned by the media and the police. However, detectives were convinced that the incident was not a robbery, as they found no signs of forced entry. They believed that the stolen items in the house were just a setup to distract the investigation. The police noted that robbers typically target empty homes to avoid confrontations and complications. If they encountered occupants, they wouldn't waste time and energy brutally killing them. Instead, they would opt for a quicker method. In the Blagg family home, a diary belonging to Jennifer was discovered. In it, she wrote about having a severe argument with Michael the day before her disappearance and fearing that he might harm her. Although she didn't elaborate on the details, she framed the situation in biblical terms. The detectives were unclear about the argument and approached Michael for clarification, but he maintained he had no memory of it. However, the police discovered a note addressed to him, apologizing for allowing negativity to creep back into their lives, suggesting relationship problems. When examining the Blagg family computer, the police were surprised to find thousands of hardcore pornography images. However, Michael denied any involvement in the images, he claiming that his wife was trying to spice up their lives. A further investigation showed that Michael and Jennifer's relationship had been troubled for a while. Michael had initially hired an escort out of curiosity, but over time he became hooked on the services. When investigators visited Michael's new house to question him, but no one opened the door, despite his car being parked outside. After hearing the sound of running water, they broke down the door and found Michael in the bathtub with cuts on his wrists that he had done to himself. In his hand, he was holding a photo of Abby and Jennifer, a Bible, and a note claiming he was not involved in their murders. Michael was rushed to the hospital, where he received medical treatment and survived. During the investigation, the sheriff's department received an anonymous tip about Michael's van being spotted near Ridge Park on the day Abby and Jennifer disappeared. This location was only a minute from them home. As a result, the police resumed their search, focusing on a 60-kilometers radius around them home. The new search lasted for 11 days, but failed to yield any results in the specified area. Subsequently, the police obtained new information. Michael was suspected of stealing an industrial item worth about $500 from his workplace shortly before Abby and Jennifer disappeared. Detectives called Michael in for questioning, suspecting he might be involved in the workplace incident. Michael broke down in tears, fearing he would be falsely accused of his family's murder, but he did not confess to the crime. Later, he explained that his emotional reaction was triggered by the fear of being wrongly accused of killing his family. A colleague of Michael contacted the police and provided crucial information. On the day Jennifer disappeared, Michael took out the trash at work, which was unusual since it was not part of his job. According to the colleague, they normally took turns doing this task. However, on that particular day, Michael insisted on doing it himself. He reacted aggressively when his colleague offered to help. It now seemed clear that Michael was trying to dispose of evidence. On June 5, 2002, the police discovered a woman's body that matched Jennifer's description. The body was wrapped in some type of cover and had holes in it, with a bullet still lodged in her head. It appeared that the killer had discarded her body in a landfill. Forensic experts confirmed through dental records that the murdered woman was indeed Jennifer. They determined that she died from a close-range gunshot wound to the head. Additionally, they also was established that she was killed while sleeping, as a retainer was found in her mouth, which she only wore at night. Unfortunately, the body had lain in the open for 7 months, and as a result, the remains were severely decomposed, providing limited information for the investigators. Investigators found that there were several garbage sites assigned to different companies. After digging at the location where the Jennifer's body was found, they confirmed that this particular area was managed by the company where Michael worked. The police, considering this coincidence to be more than accidental, they intensified their search for Abby's body at the dump but were unsuccessful. Further investigation revealed that Michael had left the city without warning, relocating to a different state. Although Abby's body was not found at the dump, the evidence was sufficient to charge Michael with the murder of Abby and Jennifer. The relatives of Jennifer were deeply upset by the manner in which her body was treated. and they strongly suspected Michael of disposing of Abby's bodies in a similar way. The detectives were unable to find anyone who knew the suspect Michael well enough to approach. However, they then discovered that his mother was still alive. Since she lived in Georgia, a state he often visited, the detectives decided to pay her a visit. Upon arriving at her house, they were met by a man. He was identified as Michael, who was subsequently arrested and transported back to Colorado to face charges of double first-degree murder. Following Michael's capture, the search teams decided to re-examine the landfill area. They regrouped and brought in volunteers to aid in the search. Over the course of 7 weeks, they searched through 7,000 tons of trash, but unfortunately, they never found Abby's body. The prosecutor's office suspected that Michael was living a double life. On the surface, the family appeared perfect, but in reality, Michael was manipulative and cruel. However, his first wife did not support these claims, stating that she had never experienced insults or physical abuse from him. In contrast, several witnesses reported that Michael's relationship with Jennifer was troubled from the start, with frequent arguments even before they got married. Michael and Jennifer's issues stemmed from Michael's love for partying and spending time with friends, while Jennifer wanted to build a strong family and asked him to stop going out. Eventually, Jennifer issued an ultimatum, and Michael chose to commit to her. They got married, and soon after, they had a child. During this time, Michael was still serving in the Navy, which often left Jennifer alone to cope with postpartum depression and care for their newborn daughter. Although she faced many difficulties, but Jennifer never complained. However, the relationship began to deteriorate due to domestic issues. After that, Michael found a job as an engineer, and things seemed to improve. He also started teaching at a Sunday school. However, his fellow teachers disagreed with his teaching methods and views on discussing topics like sex and abortion with teenagers. His liberal approach clashed with the conservative values of the Sunday school, leading to him having to quit his job there. Following this, the Blagg family traveled a bit more before settling in a new location to start fresh. This move resulted in big debt because their house in South Carolina took a long time to sell. Jennifer was initially unhappy in their new home and frequently called her friends, wishing to return. However, since Michael was earning a good income and managing to pay off their debts, she chose to stay with him during this challenging time. Before the violent incident occurred, there seemed to be a serious issue in the marriage. A local law firm employee reported that a few days before Jennifer's disappearance, she sought marriage and family counseling. Unfortunately, she was turned away because the lawyer was on vacation. Jennifer revealed that she had been a victim of Michael's violence and wanted to initiate a divorce. The firm intended to assist her as soon as they returned, but she vanished before they could meet again. Although police searched her house, car, and garage, they found no traces of her blood. However, it was suspected that Abby was likely murdered because she may have witnessed her mother's, Jennifer, murder. It was believed that she was probably strangled, which could explain why there were no blood traces found. The prosecutor's office decided to pause proceedings to gather information about the child Abby. Without a body, proving the murder would be extremely challenging. Michael was released on bail and allowed to stay with his mother within the city while awaiting the hearing. Michael claimed he could not have killed his family, stating he had no motive. He insisted that family relations were good and mentioned he had been preparing for Christmas by buying gifts worth over $5,000 for his loved ones. However, no one found his claims credible. The hearings were scheduled for March 2004. It was believed that Jennifer wanted to end her relationship with her husband, Michael, who did not agree and became angry. The prosecutor's office suspected that he killed both his wife and possibly their daughter during the night, then hid their bodies and went to work in the morning, trying to dispose of them with the trash. After his work shift, Michael returned home and called the police. Jennifer's mother testified for the prosecution. At first, she supported Michael, but her opinion changed when she saw the evidence. She claimed that Michael had been abusive to Jennifer for a long time, particularly when he was drinking. During those times, he would often attack and choke Jennifer, sometimes leaving her unconscious. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Michael guilty of murdering Jennifer and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on April 16, 2004. Although the trial concluded, but Michael's story did not end there. 10 years later, Michael had a chance to retry his case. Throughout the years, his lawyers searched for any possible ways to appeal. One major issue was that one of the jurors was blind, making it difficult for him to fully assess the evidence presented. Additionally, a female juror had intentionally provided false information on her questionnaire. She later confessed, explaining that her bias against Michael stemmed from her own experiences as a long-term victim of domestic violence. This affected her ability to objectively consider the details of the case, resulting in her vote against him. As a result, the verdict was overturned, and preparations for a new trial began. The lying juror was found guilty of contempt of court and received the 10-day prison sentence along with a $10,000 fine. In a surprising turn, the defense introduced a new suspect, a man named Philip Ruins, from Montana. He was linked to a series of brutal rapes, and both Jennifer and Abby were among his many victims. In November 2001, it was reported that he was in Colorado around the same time Abby and Jennifer went missing. Philip had a history of brutal crimes but had never faced punishment until now. In 201st, a new trial was held for him. This time, the prosecution called in an expert to analyze the crime scene. The expert suggested that the arrangement of objects in the house indicated a staged crime rather than a genuine robbery. He noted that the crime was executed clumsily and unprofessionally. According to his assessment, Jennifer was shot while she was asleep in her bed. The assailant then held her down until her heart stopped, after which he removed her body from the house and placed it in a van. Unfortunately, the expert could not provide any useful information about Abby due to a lack of evidence. Michael's family said he was heartbroken after his wife and daughter went missing. They all embraced and cried together, creating a deeply emotional scene. They found it hard to believe that he could be involved in his wife's murder. During the interrogation and trial, Michael remained quiet and composed, showing little emotion. The prosecutor interpreted his calm demeanor as a sign of guilt. However, Michael's lawyer argued that such behavior was typical for a conservative husband. Despite the lawyer's efforts, Michael was once again found guilty of murdering his wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, investigators were also looking into Philip. He was a convicted sexual predator serving 200 years for creating and distributing child pornography and for sexually abusing minors. Philip lured his young victims through his online forum. When police searched Philip's home, they discovered a list of victims' names that included Jennifer and Abby, with the date of the kidnapping coincides with the time of their disappearance. However, there is no physical evidence linking Philip to this crime, no fingerprints or DNA were found at the scene, and his handwriting did not match any evidence. Additionally, it is unclear how Jennifer's body ended up in the landfill, where trash from her husband's workplace was dumped. As a result, investigators did not believe Philip was involved in the murder of Jennifer or the disappearance of Abby. However, the trial against Philip Ruins for various charges was difficult. Many of his victims experienced significant mental health problems due to the violence they endured. Some faced substance addiction, while others suffered from persistent nightmares. Unfortunately, there has been little advancement in the investigation into Abby's disappearance, as Philip has not admitted to the murders of either Jennifer or Abby. Abby's body has still not been located, and her fate remains unknown. She could possibly still be alive. A portrait of Abby has been created, and debates are ongoing about whether Michael is truly guilty of his wife's murder or if he was wrongfully convicted. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Elizabeth Johnson. Elizabeth Johnson was 23 years old, and her husband was 25. They lived in Tempe, Arizona, USA. Although on the surface they appear to be a happy couple, their reality is much different. Elizabeth's life has been through many hardships, which have negatively impacted her relationships. Her parents were addicted to illegal substances and barely cared for her, forcing her to grow up in poverty. Fortunately, her time in this dreadful environment was short-lived. Her mother passed away when she was still young, drowning after losing consciousness from an overdose of illegal drugs. At that time, her father was also in a state of madness and could not help her. A few years later, her father died from liver disease, which was also linked to his addictions. After these incidents, Elizabeth was sent to an orphanage. Several families adopted her, but then they returned her to the orphanage. These childhood damage caused Elizabeth much suffering. She had behavioral problems and was often labeled a problem child. Now she's faced with adult problems that she doesn't know how to handle. Those who knew her well said she was immature for her age, and she lived in constant fear of abandonment. This fear made her intensely jealous of her boyfriend, Logan. Elizabeth had difficulty controlling her emotions, leading to severe psychological stress. This often resulted in conflicts with her lover, Logan. During these conflicts, she frequently lost control and sometimes physically attacked him. Her immaturity made her unable to understand her own actions. Despite this, Logan loved her, and they got married after dating for a few months. He hopes that marriage will help she change. Unfortunately, her fear grew and her tantrums became very disturbing. For example, during a picnic, they had a fight, and Logan narrowly avoided falling into the fire. He only suffered minor burns. However, when she wasn't aggressive, they seemed like a great couple. Treat each other well and have the ability to become an ideal family. Logan was already suspicious of Elizabeth's change, but he continued to hope for the best. Sometime after the marriage, they discover that Elizabeth is pregnant, which was a big surprise for them. They feel unprepared to become parents. Initially, they had planned to establish themselves before having children, so Elizabeth decided she did not want to become a mother. However, she later changed her mind and chose to continue with the pregnancy. Their son, Gabriel, was born on May 3, 2009. Unfortunately, this did nothing to make Elizabeth more mature. She still behaved like a child. According to those around her, her anger outbursts became unpredictable. During these times, she would latch on to minor issues to provoke conflicts. Gabriel is quite difficult, and she has to try very hard to control him. The boy always wanted to be comforted, and whenever Elizabeth left him alone, he would start crying. His cries irritated her, causing her to lose her temper and yell. It was a chaotic situation, and Logan trying to stay calm for the sake of the child. During that period, Logan worked hard to support his young family, which often kept him away from home. At home, he always tries to help his wife and take care of the children. He wanted to be close to his son, but Elizabeth's temperament made things difficult. Not only was she as volatile as before, but baby's constant crying and irritability made her ready to lash out at Logan over minor issues. Her jealousy increased. She becomes more suspicious of Logan's interactions with other women. Her fear of being abandoned turned into panic, haunting her. Everything is getting worse and worse. Elizabeth accused Logan of loving their son, Gabriel, too much. She even grew jealous of the child, convinced that Logan loved her less since his birth. During her angry outbursts, her behavior became more extreme. She started smashing things, including household appliances and dishes. On one occasion, She even took a kitchen knife and cut up the sofa and her son's bed. Logan finds it very difficult living in such an environment. During these episodes, he feared for his life and the safety of the son. He wanted to be close to his child, but he didn't want to continue to endure Elizabeth's anger. Finally, he ran out of patience, especially when Elizabeth didn't change. After a few months of living like this, Logan announced that he wanted a divorce and moved out with his son, Gabriel. Elizabeth's childhood fears and traumas return, but she never takes responsibility for what happened. Instead, she blamed her husband, Logan, calling him narrow-minded. Worst of all, she began to threaten to give Gabriel up for adoption. Logan assured her that he could take care of the baby himself, making such an action unnecessary. Unfortunately, Elizabeth saw this as a new way to manipulate the situation and frequently used this threat against Logan. When Logan consulted a lawyer, he learned that by law, Elizabeth could not arbitrarily let someone else adopt their son, Gabriel. If the child's biological father disagreed, they would need to settle custody arrangements in court. Elizabeth could have given full custody to he, but she didn't want to. She just wanted to control him longer and get revenge. Eventually, they divorced, and they were granted joint custody. However, her erratic behavior made he feel it was unsafe for their son, Gabriel, to stay with her, so he sought full custody. This process took time. Meanwhile, the boy lived with his father, and his mother visited him according to their agreement. Over time, Elizabeth seemed to become less anxious and calmer. What happened at Elizabeth's house when Logan wasn't there was unclear. The situation might have been worsening. As Christmas approached, Logan planned to spend the holiday with his family. He had a grand vacation in mind. They would meet Santa Claus and give Gabriel his first Christmas presents. But this plan was not to be. On December 18, 2009, Logan was supposed to pick up Gabriel from Elizabeth's house around 4 p.m. However, when he arrived, no one opened the door and the car was not in the driveway. This was strange, because they had planned that he would visit and he will take Gabriel away. Then, he continued to knock. By this point, they had a well-established custody arrangement for the child. Everyone was accustomed to it, so Elizabeth's actions seemed unusual. She couldn't just take Gabriel and go wherever she pleased. Logan looked through the bedroom window and saw furniture boxes scattered and emptied on the floor. He thinks she's gone crazy again. She must have packed her things and taken Gabriel away to an unknown location, so he became very worried and immediately contacted the police. Unfortunately, by law, nothing could be done because Elizabeth was Gabriel's biological mother. She was the child's legal guardian. The authorities ignored Logan's worries. Although this made he feel discomfort, he was forced to go home. For the following days, nobody managed to reach Elizabeth. She remained silent. No one understood what had happened, making the situation more complicated. Only Logan and his family were interested in the search. The police ignored his warnings that Elizabeth could be a danger to Gabriel. He had no choice but to do everything to contact she. Unexpectedly, on December 27th, he received a message from an unknown number, but it was clear it was from Elizabeth. She wrote that he would never find his beloved son, Gabriel. She was leaving the country, and when she arrived, she would send him the exact address where he could find Gabriel's body. She also added that, earlier, she had strangled her son, Gabriel. After hearing these words, Logan could barely stand, but he immediately called the unknown number. At first, Elizabeth ignored those calls, but finally answered on the 6th attempt. Logan insisted that she was lying and that Gabriel was fine. However, Elizabeth claimed to have strangled the baby and put it in a trash bag with diapers and then threw it into a dumpster. She said it was revenge for his countless betrayals. After this, Logan contacted the police, but to his surprise, he was again told that they could do nothing. The police did not take what Elizabeth said seriously. The next day, the police got involved because Elizabeth will have to attend the final trial for custody of Gabriel, but she did not appear in court as expected. So they started looking for her. They quickly determined she had gone to San Antonio, Texas. Shortly after moving there, she sought employment and attended a nightclub casting to become a dancer. Other dancers remembered her well and identified her from photographs. She was seen attending the casting alone, without Gabriel. However, after that, she did not appear. From the first time we met, everyone realized that she had a very bad personality. Detectives found that Elizabeth had tried to get jobs at 2 nightclubs at the same time. However, then, her actions became puzzling because she didn't start working at either place. Investigators tried to determine the last time she was with Gabriel before she called Logan to report the murder. From trip records, they learned that on December 27th, she bought a bus ticket traveling between states. Gabriel did not accompany her on this trip from San Antonio to Florida. The investigation brought them to Miami on December 29th, where Elizabeth was arrested at a motel. Investigators questioned her about Gabriel's whereabouts and interrogated her about messages and a call to Logan. She denied the accusations, claiming she only wanted to annoy and get back at he. She mentioned she was heading to San Antonio to meet a couple interested in adoption. This was actually about illegally handing over a child to strangers. She claimed that she spent 3 days with they to ensure they were suitable and capable of caring for Gabriel. On the 3rd day, they met at a park. She gave Gabriel to they and left to begin a new life. She couldn't recall their names or contact details. But after some thought, she mentioned that the woman might be named Cheryl. It all sounds unreasonable, and the most confusing thing is that Elizabeth decided to leave Gabriel with a stranger, while Logan wanted to take care of the boy himself. Why is it necessary to separate the child from the father and find another family to raise the boy? That is illegal. Elizabeth had no answers to these questions. Law enforcement officers searched the San Antonio landfill using specially trained dogs, as there was a chance that the tip given to Logan was true. However, Gabriel's body was not found there. Then, authorities focused their attention on a family suspected of illegally adopting Gabriel. For Logan, this lead was his last hope of finding his son alive. Logan recalled a similar incident 6 months earlier. On that occasion, she went to the airport with Gabriel, seemingly planning to start a new life. Luckily, she didn't make it to the plane and was arrested by the police for trying to kidnap Gabriel. Elizabeth recounted that she cried a lot at the airport. And then, she met a 40-year-old woman named Tammy Smith. Seeing her hugging Gabriel and crying, Tammy decided to comfort her by expressing sympathy. She confided in Tammy that she felt incapable of being a good mother to her baby. Tammy then asked if she was considering giving her baby up for adoption. At first, she insisted that she wouldn't do it. Despite this, she and Tammy became friends after their encounter. They shared many similarities, particularly a difficult past. Tammy had worked as a dancer in a strip club and had been married to 2 men simultaneously at one point. She had a deep fear of being alone, which negatively impacted her life and relationships. She had been married 5 times and had 3 children with different men. All her children lived with their biological fathers, and she had lost parental rights. Unexpectedly, after 2001, changes occurred in Tammy's life. She decides that she really wants to raise her child and get her child back. There was no longer an opportunity to give birth again. So she turned to the services of the black market. During the investigation, it was established that Tammy adopted 2 children and was constantly looking for young mothers with problems so that she could adopt more children. She used social networks to persuade young women to give up their children and even approached pregnant women on the street, asking if they were planning to give up the child. After talking with Tammy, Elizabeth decided to give Gabriel up for adoption. Temmie became Gabriel's mother. When Logan learned of this, he immediately reported it to the police. Gabriel was taken from the Temmie home and returned to live with his father Logan. Temmie claimed that she did not know about the falsification of the adoption documents. Logan attempted to obtain custody to prevent Elizabeth from being able to see Gabriel again. However, the process dragged on for 6 months, which ultimately led to Gabriel's disappearance. After being arrested, Elizabeth launched a public relations campaign to support herself while awaiting trial. She frequently communicated with the media, gave interviews, and blamed Logan for the incident. She argues that if he agrees to let Temmie adopt Gabriel, none of this would have happened. Logan was shocked by her actions, which he perceived as driven by revenge. During the custody trial, he repeatedly sought sole custody, as he was the primary caregiver. Elizabeth wasn't interested in the boy and just wanted to get rid of him. Despite this, the court awarded joint custody. He tried to challenge this decision, but the court did not agree. After several months, Elizabeth faced multiple charges, including forging Logan's signature on adoption documents. However, the court considered this a minor crime, so it only imposed a 30-day prison sentence for signature forgery. During this time, the custody trial concluded. He was given full custody of Gabriel, but he still has no idea where the boy is. Investigators found no evidence of a crime, such as blood stains on the car, and did not find Gabriel's body. So they began to suspect that there might be a black market in child trafficking involved. This theory seemed plausible, since San Antonio is statistically a hub for black markets. Elizabeth had been in the city for some time, so it is likely that she had contact with organizations involved in child trafficking. During this time, she lived in a motel with her child, Gabriel, but later moved out without him. This is a common tactic used by these organizations, which often conduct exchanges in inexpensive motels to avoid drawing attention. Suspicion was heightened by the fact that Elizabeth had no relatives or acquaintances in San Antonio, suggesting her choice of location was deliberate. These factors all corroborate the initial story the detective shared after her arrest, suggesting that Gabriel may have been with strangers. The biggest challenge was keeping track of the child, which was almost impossible, as he was so young. There were several indirect signs. After arriving in San Antonio, Elizabeth posted on social media that if you want to do something, you will find a way to do it. In another post, she mentioned starting a new life. Later, she shared a photo showing 2 diamond rings. Logan knew she couldn't afford such expensive jewelry, valued at over $20,000. Elizabeth claimed they were gifts from admirers, but this seemed unlikely. This new information supports the theory that she sold Gabriel illegally, as payments for such transactions are not typically made in cash. During the investigation, the detectives contacted a young woman who had worked part-time as a nanny for Elizabeth when she first arrived in San Antonio with Gabriel. The girl was hired through an ad and looked after Gabriel for a day. She was shocked by how indifferent Elizabeth was to her son. Elizabeth didn't care if he was tired, needed sleep, or was hungry. The only thing Elizabeth requested was to give the boy medicine regularly to keep him quiet. Elizabeth simply wanted him to remain silent. The type of medication was unknown, but it was likely a sedative. Elizabeth spent 3 years in prison before her trial began. Initially, she was charged with kidnapping, but this charge was dropped. At that time, the law allowed a mother with joint custody to move across the country with her child, so it wasn't illegal. She was later charged with endangering Gabriel's life. The trial lasted 2 days, after which the jury found Elizabeth guilty. She was sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison. This decision angered many people. Logan was shocked when his 7-month-old son, Gabriel, goes missing, but Elizabeth is given only a light sentence. The prosecutor's office said they had no evidence to prove Elizabeth harmed or killed Gabriel, so no other charges could be brought against Elizabeth. Elizabeth denied the story she told Logan over the phone after Gabriel's disappearance. She continued to deny murdering her son, claiming instead that she gave the child to a couple. She explained that the message and call were meant to anger Logan. And she lied about the boy's body being in the dump. Detectives repeatedly questioned her in prison, trying to get information about Gabriel. Throughout this time, she never cooperated with the investigation, nor did she share anything with Logan or her lawyer. Elizabeth insisted that she knew nothing about Gabriel's condition. She also has no interest in knowing what happened to her son or where he is now. Logan was convinced that the child had been dead for a long time, believing she had indeed disposed of him at the dump, as she mentioned in the message. A recording of a phone conversation between Elizabeth and her old friend Temmie surfaced. Elizabeth was aware that all prison calls were recorded, so she deliberately lied to distract the detectives. During the call, she praised the detectives for their work but then expressed outrage. Then, she confesses that Temmie ruined her life. Temmie got her involved in illegal activities. Temmie's reaction seemed genuine, as she denied all of Elizabeth's accusations. The two women ended up blaming each other for their problems, which ultimately ended their friendship. It remains unclear who was lying during the call. In 2014, Elizabeth was released from prison and placed on probation for 3 years. However, she repeatedly violated the terms. Just a month later, she moved to New Mexico, which was a serious violation since she was required to regularly report to her probation officer. As a result, Elizabeth was arrested and extradited back. She was briefly imprisoned again. Meanwhile, the search for Gabriel continued, without success. Police occasionally receive new leads, but all lead to dead ends, including DNA analysis, reviewing CCTV footage, tracking geolocation, and searching databases. No matter how hard they tried, the boy was never found. After serving her prison sentence, Elizabeth was released. She changed her name several times to start anew and eventually got married, settling in New Mexico. In May 2021, she became pregnant again. This caused controversy. Many criticized Elizabeth, believing she shouldn't become a mother again, fearing she might abandon or harm the child. When speaking to reporters, Elizabeth continued to deny all allegations. In an interview, she claimed that her worst punishment wasn't prison but living without knowing Gabriel's fate. She insisted she had changed and regretted giving her child away, but few believed her. Gabriel's father, Logan, has devoted a great deal of time, effort, and resources to searching for his son. Years later, he had a new family, but he still hoped to find his first child. Although Logan tried his best, but the fate of Gabriel remains a mystery known only to Elizabeth. Logan continues to hope that Elizabeth will eventually reveal the truth so he can find his son. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Marco Marialini. Marco Marialini was born on April 13, 1959, in the town of Brescia, Italy. His father worked as a builder, and his mother Maria Lini was a housewife. She was obsessed with cleanliness and constantly tidied the house. Everything had to be in its place, and any mess could cause her to have a nervous breakdown. Marco had an older sister who was 2 years older. After Marco was born, his mother felt overwhelmed and struggled to keep the house clean. She suffered from emotional distress and may have suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder, although she did not recognize her condition and never sought medical help. A month after Marco's birth, he was placed in the care of his paternal grandparents, where he lived for 2 years. His parents eventually brought him back home, believing their situation had improved and that they could handle the challenges of parenting. Once back home, Maria attempted to care for Marco. But he was very active and often caused trouble. He didn't listen to her and frequently threw tantrums. Frustrated, Maria sometimes lost her temper with him. Although Marco's father tried to step in during these conflicts, Maria dismissed his attempts. He is a calm and gentle man who always avoids conflicts with his wife to keep the peace. In the family of Marie, a serious incident occurred. Maria was trying to calm Marco, who was throwing another tantrum for no apparent reason and wouldn't stop. In a moment of frustration, she grabbed him and accidentally threw him out of an open window. Marco fell several floors and miraculously caught on the clotheslines located below, which saved his life. As Marco grew older, he gained weight. He didn't go on diets or actively try to lose weight, but he felt uncomfortable in his larger body. During his teenage years, he began to compare himself to his friends and felt disgusted by any girl who weighed more than he did. Additionally, Marco wanted his girlfriend to have a strong sex drive, equal to his own. However, finding someone who met these criteria was challenging. Most of the girls he met were either too heavy or not up to his standards. Because of this, Marco had a hard time finding a partner until he was 19, when he met Lucia. Marco and Lucia met in 1978. Lucia was short and weighed 100 pounds, and Marco fell in love with her petite figure and sought a close relationship. However, when Lucia first undressed in front of Marco, he was disappointed in her figure. Despite this, Marco continued to date her because he appreciated her calm, modest, and composed demeanor. Meanwhile, he continued to search for his ideal partner. A few months after starting their relationship, Marco joined the army and was stationed in Pisa, Italy. Believing that he would quickly find new love elsewhere, he stopped contacting Lucia. After a few months, when Lucia started dating someone new, Marco realized that he didn't want to lose her. He contacted her again and even proposed. Marco admitted that he decided to marry Lucia because he thought he could change her to fit his preferences. They got married in 1980, and soon after, Marco focused on controlling Lucia's weight. He believed that 45 kilograms was too heavy for a woman, so Lucia agreed to go on a diet. Marco restricted her food intake and weighed her regularly. When she lost weight, he praised her and expressed his love. However, if she gained weight, he became extremely harsh. After a few months, Lucia reached a dangerously low weight of 33 kilograms, which made Marco happy. Then, unexpectedly, Lucia became pregnant despite her low weight. Marco accepted this and allowed her to eat freely, he realizing that she shouldn't be restricted during her pregnancy. As Lucia's belly began to grow, Marco became unhappy with it. Their intimacy began to falter. During this time, Marco often fantasized about women who were very thin, like skeletons. He often fantasized about being able to see the woman's spine. As Lucia entered her final months of pregnancy, Marco began dating other women, especially those who were not only thin but also anorexic. However, he soon realized that these women were not right for him. Because they have unpleasant personalities and, most importantly, lack interest in intimacy. They make their own choices about food and eating, which is contrary to Marco's desire to have complete control over his diet. In 1981, Lucia gave birth to a daughter, and a year later, their family welcomed their second child. After giving birth, Lucia gained a significant amount of weight, causing Marco to increasingly distance himself from her. He found her post-pregnancy body unattractive. He eventually decided to divorce her, wanting to ensure that their children would stay with their mother. The divorce was amicable. Marco then began looking for a new partner, a journey that lasted nearly 10 years. During this time, he opened his own antique shop. In 1994, dating through newspaper ads began to become popular. Marco, 35, posted an ad describing who he was looking for. A very thin woman, not anorexic, aged 18 to 50. He received responses from 21 women and invited them on a date. Among them, he was most interested in Monica, who was from Sicily and 5 years younger than him. She was 1.72 meters tall and weighed 45 kilograms. She was friendly and outgoing. Curious about Marco's unusual ad, she decided to respond. Monica and Marco began to see each other regularly. While Monica viewed their relationship as casual, Marco wanted something more serious. He tried to convince her to move in with him. After a while, Monica decided to move in with Marco. In the same year, he started facing challenges at work. He had fallen into debt, and his antique shop was losing money. To help him, Monica lent him 76 million lira, the amount for which she sold the house. This was a large sum, considering that the average salary in Italy at that time was around 2 million lira. Although Marco proposed to Monica, she rejected him. At first, they lived as a normal couple, but after a while, Marco began to interfere with her diet. He said that a 1.72 m tall girl weighing only 33 kilograms was beautiful. But he set her goal weight at 38 kilograms. Monica agreed, Marco still secretly hoping she would reach 33 kilograms. It is unclear why he set that number. Marco limited Monica's meals to once a day, usually consisting of a plate of green salad or vegetables. He monitored the food in their house, marking the cereal jars and making sure Monica did not eat anything without his knowledge. He weighed her several times the day and became angry if he noticed her gaining a significant amount of weight. If her weight increased, he would force her to vomit and sometimes resort to physical violence. On weekends, the couple often eats out. Marco enjoys a hearty meal, ordering an appetizer, a second course, and a dessert. Monica, on the other hand, limits herself to a vegetable salad without dressing or unsweetened green tea. This is her routine, even on holidays. After a few months of dieting, she reached her goal weight, but soon after, her weight started to climb to 40 kilograms. Monica kept her diet a secret from everyone, including her parents and friends. As she began to lose weight, her relatives noticed and began to ask about her health. To avoid their questions, she changed the subject and eventually isolated herself, cutting off all contact with her friends and ignoring their calls. Over time, her health deteriorated. She felt weak, had no motivation to get out of bed, and her period stopped. Monica was constantly hungry and obsessed with food. She resorted to stealing, sneaking small dry crackers that Marco never counted. One day, she even ate a whole raw onion. When the Marco discovered that food was missing, he punished Monica severely. He forced her to have sex, physically abused her, and made her sleep on the floor. After 2 years of enduring this treatment, Monica felt completely drained. She finally made the decision to leave the house. When she told Marco that she wanted to end their relationship and return to her parents, he responded by saying that she would have to kill him for that to happen. He then threatened her with brutal revenge if she attempted to escape. In the spring of 1996, Marco and Monica went to a restaurant. Marco ordered a plate of spaghetti, while Monica chose a green salad and asked for no oil or seasoning. While they were waiting for their food, Marco said he needed to go to the bathroom. After Marco left the table, Monica suddenly took his plate of spaghetti and started eating it ravenously. When Marco returned from the restroom, he became extremely angry at Monica's actions. He snatched the plate from her hands and demanded that she calm down. In response, Monica rushed into the restaurant's kitchen, where the cooks and waitstaff were busy. She grabbed a plate of food and began eating with her hands. Marco found her there and brought her back to their table. He shouted at her and then slapped her hard across the face. The restaurant staff and other customers were puzzled and merely watched the chaotic scene in silence. After returning home, Marco decided to punish Monica. He stripped her and told her to sleep on the floor while he went to the bedroom to sleep comfortably in his warm bed. That night, Monica picked up a heavy hammer and attacked Marco while he was sleeping, hitting him on the head before fleeing the house. Hours later, Marco woke up with a severe headache and saw blood near him. Realizing that Monica was gone, he ran to his neighbor, who called an ambulance. Marco was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, he was not seriously injured and recovered fairly quickly. The police arrested Monica and took her into custody. During the interrogation, Marco defended Monica, acknowledging that he had been cruel to her. Marco said that there had been some misunderstandings in their relationship and that they would work things out. At trial, Monica was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years of house arrest. She then moved to her parents' home in Domodossola, a city in northern Italy, 200 kilometers away from Marco's home. During her house arrest, Monica was still able to use a phone. Although she never contacted Marco, he called her regularly. At first, he seemed concerned, showing concern for her well-being. However, over time, his calls became too frequent. During one conversation, Marco confessed that he could not live without her and wanted to see her again. Monica rejected his advances, but he persisted. In 1997, Marco wrote and published his first book, The Anorexia Hunter. The original cover photo that Marco chose featured a healthy, chubby man holding a skinny woman. He based the characters on the American cartoon Popeye the Sailor. However, due to copyright issues, Marco was unable to use the image, so the publisher released the book with a different cover. Marco has publicly stated that the book is an autobiography that reflects his real life. He expressed that he felt deprived of love and care since he was a child. He has a complicated relationship with his mother. Although he hates her, he sometimes feels affection for her. Marco describes his father as a weak and indecisive man. Marco wrote about his relationship with Lucia. In the book, he called Monica Barbara. He discussed the theme of control and power over girls. According to the story, the author killed Barbara. During the book's launch, Marco publicly declared himself a monster who needed to be stopped. An editorial writer who was present at the event found Marco's tone very offensive. After reading the book, the editorial writer went to the police to express his concerns. However, the police dismissed his report, believing that Barbara's murder was completely fictional. At the time, Marco had no criminal record, making it impossible to charge him based solely on the content of his book. When Marco's autobiography was released, Monica was still under house arrest for another year. Marco sent her a signed copy of his book with the message, "Love and Hate." He continued to call her, and Monica recorded their conversations on a dictaphone. Concerned about his mental health, she urged Marco to see a doctor. During his therapy sessions, Marco opened up about his obsessive thoughts and troubling fantasies, revealing the truth about his life. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for several weeks, but after his treatment, he returned home feeling disillusioned with medicine, realizing that the medication had not helped him. In 1998, Monica, who was 29 years old, was finally released from house arrest and allowed to travel around the country. Marco continued to contact her, pleading for a meeting. Although Monica initially refused, she realized that he wouldn't give up easily. Eventually, she agreed to one last meeting with him but specified her conditions. It had to be during the day in a crowded place. On July 14, 1998, Monica met Marco at a small beach in Verbania on the shores of Lake Maggiore, where young couples were swimming and sunbathing. They talked for a while, but then Marco began to pressure her to return to their previous relationship. Monica stood firm in her refusal, and in response, Marco started to threaten her. Monica and Marco were sitting on the shore when she suddenly stood up and ran away. Marco quickly caught up with her and knocked her to the ground. She screamed for help, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Although there were many witnesses, no one intervened. Marco then took out a knife and stabbed Monica 22 times, killing her on the spot. The witnesses called the police, but by the time the ambulance and police arrived, Marco had already swum out to sea. Officers using a lifeboat on the beach caught Marco. During questioning, Marco admitted to his crime, claiming that he had no intention of killing Monica. He said that he came to the beach hoping to convince her to return to the relationship. If she refused, he planned to kidnap her using his car parked nearby. Police found ropes, chains, knives, locks, and duct tape, suggesting a premeditated plan that ultimately failed. Marco denied wanting to run away after the murder. He mentioned that he tried to end his life but failed. During the investigation, comic book drawings were discovered in his home. In these drawings, he depicted himself as a large ball and the girl as a thin line. His artwork expressed mockery towards women. During his conversation with the journalist, Marco showed no remorse for his crime, stating that he felt he had no other option and did what he had to do. However, Marco acknowledged that he posed a danger to society. Marco Mariolini was found to be sane and guilty of murder, he receiving a 30-year prison sentence. While incarcerated, there was a time when he refused to eat, took laxatives, and lost weight down to 44 kilograms, but later he regained it. He was a problematic inmate, starting a fire in his cell and causing minor trouble for the guards. As a result, he was transferred to different prisons multiple times. Marco wrote letters claiming he should not be released because he would kill again, but he later denied this and then wrote similar letters once more. Italian director Matteo Rone was inspired by Marco's horror stories to create the film First Love. Released in 2004. Although it did not receive major awards, it drew attention to Marco's past. In 2021, there was an article written about Marco's early release and it was revealed that he had been transferred to a mental hospital. In late 2002, journalists approached Marco for an interview. During the interview, he expressed a desire to forget his past experiences with women. The journalists noticed that he seemed confused, often unable to answer their questions. His mental state may have been affected by the effects of medication.